Test 1, 2.
No, she's still. Okay. Good evening. Okay. I call to order the meeting of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee on Thursday, October 19th, 2023 at 7:01 p.m. And we'll begin by inviting you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and it's also being live streamed on HWCam. All right. And is our Zoom up and running? Okay, excellent. I will start we'll start with citizens' comments. I'm going to start in the room. If there's any citizen who is wishing to speak to the committee, I will ask you to approach the podium. Okay, seeing none. Mr. Tracy, do we look like we have anyone on Zoom who wants to speak?
None.
Okay. All right. At this moment, then, I will close the time for citizens' comments at 7:02. Okay. As is our practice, I'm going to ask us, I'm going to ask us to read some school committee protocols. Jen is going to start us off, and we're actually going to read our final 4 protocols. So I'm going to just ask you to pass it along, and we're going to get to the end. The reason I wanted to wrap that up is next meeting we're going to have a review of those and a vote to re-up. So wanted to get through them all.
As elected members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. A school committee meeting is a business meeting that is held in public, not a public meeting. The committee will make every effort to ensure meetings are effective and efficient.
Thank you. Francesca, you read number 12, please.
The school committee meeting recognizes the importance of working collaboratively with town officials and actively seeking their support to improve the district.
Thank you. Amy, can you read number 13, please?
Which one?
Number 13.
13. The school committee will demonstrate professional and collegial relations with one another. To this end, members will work to maintain trust and mutual respect between and among each other, the superintendent, and the administration by treating everyone with dignity and respect, even in time of disagreement. All voices and concerns of individual school committee members shall be given equal weight and significance.
Thank you. And number 14, recognizing the importance of honoring these protocols, members will respectfully remind each other when they get off track. Thank you all. Next up, we have a portion of our school committee mission statement. David? Oh, sorry.
The Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee will lead and inspire a district that attracts and retains high-quality educators by acknowledging and respecting their expertise and professionalism.
Thank you. Okay. Next up on the agenda, we have our student representative here with us this evening, Whitney Fitzgibbons. Mr. Tracy?
Yep.
All right.
Whenever you're ready, Whitney.
Hi everyone, it's great to be back here with an opportunity to tell you all about some things that are currently going on within the schools in the district. First at the high school, it's pretty busy right now. 10th and 11th graders can take the PSAT on the 24th and the 25th. There's a high school open house at 6:30 on the 25th. Right now, student council is beginning to prepare for Spirit Week. So right now we're organizing different activities and dress days for the week. The juniors are selling concessions at home football games and have a bake sale planned for the 31st right after school. And 10th graders also have a bake sale planned for November 7th after school as well. The seniors are planning homecoming, which will be during Spirit Week as well on November 17th. And the harvest concert will also be during Spirit Week on the 21st. As for clubs and sports, sports at the high school are very strong right now. Boys and girls soccer are doing very well this season, as per usual. Golf and volleyball and boys and girls cross country are also very strong right now. These teams are all expected to advance to the state tournament. The field hockey and football seasons are also underway, but unfortunately they're not having the same successes as some of our other teams are. Right now at the high school, DECA is just starting up. 250 students are participating in DECA this year, which is over half of the student body. And Robotics Club, Fashion Club, and Science Club are also underway. At the middle school, there's a golf intramural and a cross-country intramural. There's also art club, chorale, jazz band, and guitar and ukulele club. As for the elementary schools, Winthrop School will have their Halloween happenings on October 27th. Bucher School just had a fun run last Friday on the 13th. And lastly, Cutler School had a family movie night last Friday the 13th, and they will have their annual ski, skate, and snowboard sale on November 18th and 19th. Thanks for having me back, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you, Whitney. Does anyone have any questions? Whitney, I just want to say, I think I say it, I think I've said it before, but it really means a lot to hear that report in your voice. To hear the student voice means a lot to all of us here. That's why we're here, is to serve the students, and so it really does. It means a lot, and I appreciate you finding out the information about the other schools, because I know you're not there. I know that it's work. So thank you for that. Again, as I've said before, you are more than welcome to stay for the whole meeting. And we also know you most likely have some other things that you might want to be doing this evening or have to be doing this evening, so you are also free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you.
Thanks, Whitney.
Okay. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Does anyone have any items that they want to hold from the consent agenda? Okay, Francesca?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District approves the consent agenda as written.
Okay, all those in favor?
Didn't get a second.
Get a second?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Second.
Thank you. No, I think, seconded by David. Thank you. And I appreciate you all keeping me on my toes. Thank you. All those in favor? All right, and it is unanimous of the 5 members present. Okay. And the motion passes. Next up, new business. We have some MCAS information.
Yep, I'm just gonna switch computers.
Okay.
Good evening. Tonight, the principals are with us this evening to present the accountability data that has recently been released by the state. This is data that goes all the way back to, in some cases, November of last year, where makeups occur mostly at the high school level. February, making some science, and then moving into the assessment season for all schools into March, all the way through June for tests and assessments related to science at the high school level. So I'm going to start out initially by talking about some of the district level results. And as you can see here, the district level results are improving. We're up 2% over last year on our proficiency ratings. We also have 7% more students in the exceeding category overall, which is a nice increase for us. Given that the state, as you can see, is relatively flat, we've been able to widen that gap a little bit between the state averages in ELA versus the district averages, and also the average scaled score has gone up from 508 to 510 across the district for an average. Math, flat results, very similar to the entire state. Many of the superintendents I talked to were also wrestling with this and trying to wonder why. In our case, we have a number of things that you'll hear about from the principals tonight that we've been doing. Math has been really a new shift for us. As you know, for the last 2 years, we've really focused on getting CKLA, our literacy curriculum, up and running during last year and moving into this year. And this year we've shifted into math as well. So district-wide, we're really taking a look at math at all three levels, the elementary, the middle, and the high school. So these results, they're slightly up. I mean, when you look at the comparative average scaled score, you're looking at a +1. So we went from 504 to 505 on our average scale score. Our kids in the exceeding category has gone up slightly. And the kids in the not meeting category has gone down, so that's good. We're getting more kids into the higher levels of partially meeting and exceeding. And then science is on a bit of an upswing, as you can see by this. There's 3% increase from last year. When you look at the number of students who are proficient across the district in science, it's almost 70%. We are 26% above the state average, and as you can see, we've been rising steadily since the 21 assessment season. What's interesting is the average score went down by 1 point. We were 509 last year, and we're down to 508 this year, but yet still swinging up. And the really number of kids that you see in the meeting exceeding category remains roughly the same. So the science results really have a slight uptick, and really it's a place in the state where the state went the opposite way, and a lot of the frustrations were around science in some of the elementary levels. Like there was a downward trend across the state. So it's something that everybody was wrestling with. We happened to do a nice job with our science last year. The accountability system is extremely complex this year. We have not had a full accountability system being used in the state since 2019. And what I mean by that is we haven't really had any targets to push for. The state hasn't set any bars, if you will, or set any levels or targets for us to reach. This year they really have gone above and beyond it and making this more as difficult as possible. But the reality is there are three pieces to the puzzle in the accountability system. The normative component, which is really just a comparative of schools, and then the criterion reference component is measuring whether or not schools are meeting their targets. So those two components really drive the system when you're looking at it from kids in similar grades, for example. So they'll use the normative component for grade comparisons. They also use it for school comparisons as well. The second piece of the puzzle is how they're measuring the performance. And I'll show you in a different slide, but there are a number of indicators that they're using, including achievement, student growth, high school completion, English learner proficiency, and there are other indicators, including attendance. And the state has really put a lot of stock in the attendance as a piece of the puzzle, and we'll show you how that gets broken out in a second. And then really categorizing schools, like grouping schools in various places along their data set. So you're either in one or two categories. You're not requiring assistance or intervention, or you're requiring assistance or intervention. In the district's case, all 5 schools are listed as not requiring assistance or intervention at this time. So we talked about the indicators, and here's how they stack up. At the elementary school and the middle school are considered to fit in the first category on your left, the non-high school category. And this is how, these are the percentages they use to break it out. So what they do is they weight each of these indicators against 2 groups. In our case, all of the kids, and then you'll see as we move forward through the presentation, versus high need students. So the non-high school group, the 3 elementary schools and the middle school, the indicators are achievement, which is really the average scaled score, which we've seen just a minute ago, student growth percentile, which is an average of student growth, and those make up the majority, 90% of the weighting of the indicators. And then the chronic absentee piece is what I talked about a second ago. 10% of your overall score is chronic absenteeism. Today we had a conference call with the Commissioner of Education, all superintendents and district leaders, and the entire call was about statewide chronic absenteeism. Last year, 1 in 4 students were listed in the state as being chronically absent from school, which in this state is 18 absences or more. 25% of the kids in the entire state were absent from school 18 days or more. That's a big deal. And as you'll see in our presentation, there are some correlations with school attendance and scores. On the high school side, there are some shifts in the weighting category. So achievement is now 40%. Student growth percentile is 20%, so you have 60% of your score. But then you have another 20% for a 4-year cohort graduation rate, never been included in the assessment of schools. Extended engagement rate, which is percentage of kids and how long you've had them. Do you have them for 4 years? Do you have them for 5 years? And then annual dropout rate, which is a bit of a whammy for schools that have a one-time instance of, oh, we went from 1 dropout to 4 the following year. That can hurt you in your percentages of that indicator. And then the additional factors, chronic absenteeism, and then advanced course completion. And advanced course completion is really looking at kids that are doing 4 years of English, 4 years of math, and then some of the other courses. Brian will talk about that a little bit in his presentation. The accountability reports.
Eric,
yeah.
can I just interrupt for 1
Yeah.
second? Does anyone else have a question? Because I do. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's okay.
Do you have a question? I just want to make sure that I understood this slide before you move forward.
Yep.
Because I didn't understand it before your presentation, but I think I do now, and I want to make sure.
The
This,
next slide will help. So
okay.
Ask your.
So no, this slide, just so I understand it, this is a universal slide that applies to all schools. This is the way that the state weights
Yep.
and create that, and this slide would be the same no matter what school we were sitting in.
Correct.
Okay, just making sure.
So there are 2 categories, the non-high school, which in our case is
Yeah.
the 3 elementaries and middle school, and then the high school.
Other questions, Francesca?
Wait, hold on, but the numbers that we see, those are specific for our school, it's just the categories I'm not sure.
No, this,
The numbers are universal,
Okay,
so in every district, the same numbers apply. So every elementary school in the state is being weighted this way.
okay. Oh, it's just how they're weighted.
Yes.
no, that
Okay.
was my question too,
Yeah.
Francesca, so that was, yes, yeah.
The next slide will help. They kind of go together.
Yeah.
So when you look at our indicator report, this is the first time since 2019 that the state has returned to this full level accountability system. And they're fairly inclusive reports. Lowest performing students group, progress towards improvement targets that none of us even knew what they were before we started. You get the improvement targets kind of when you get your report. Your improvement target was 0.4 or 0.6 improvement. School and student group percentiles, overall classifications, and school recognition. So this, on your right side, is the report that you would see online for our schools. This is a dummy report. It is not a report from any of our schools. But I think it's important to note that when you look at these reports, and I'm going to just back this out a little bit so I can blow it up a bit more. This bottom section of the report is an important piece of the puzzle. as we look at the comparatives. So I'm going to steal this microphone for a second. It's set up in two segments. So these are the indicators on the previous slide: achievement, growth, high school completion. So certain things apply to certain grades, as we showed in the previous slide. On this half, it's all students. So there are certain targets, and in this case, English language arts, you could get a total of 4 percentage points, and this school got 0 out of the 4. In mathematics achievement, you could have got 4, this school got 2. On the second side of it, it's the lowest performing students, or the lowest quartile. So the state takes the entire school, divides it up into quarters, and the lowest quartile of students' information is on this side of the report. And then what they do is a little bit of a statistical or analytical magic. They have kind of fudged the statistics a little bit here at the state level. They come up with a percentage of the total. So the total points you could have got, and then the total points you did got. So they put the total points that you received over the total points that you could have received, and they give you a percentage. And in this case, it's 38 on the left-hand side. On the other side, they do the same thing. And then this case, it's 59. And then they, what I consider a sin, averages, which is not something that most of us accept in the realm of statistical analysis, but it does skew the scores. The state claims they're doing that purposefully so that they can put more emphasis on the right side, the lowest performing students. And it makes sense in some ways, and you'll see in some of our data that it does shift the bar a little bit. But if you're doing a realistic weighting of groups of students, you would use the N, or the number of students, to weight with, which would give you a much more accurate percentage. In this case, they just averaged the 38 and the 59, and they came up with 48, and that's the school's total percentage points. It's about as complex as they get with this process, other than figuring out, when principals are looking at the data, trying to figure out how their targets were determined in the first place. So we spent a lot of time working on targets, working with our principals to try to even understand the data for ourselves. And these reports, by the way, are all available online. They'll be shifted on our website after this presentation, probably by Monday at the latest, but just so everybody can see them. They are online if you search DESE's website for accountability and the district site. So how do we stack up against local schools? I don't want to brag or anything, but
Can I?
when you look at this is a random list of schools that was generated by the state. Danvers, Ipswich, Linfield, Manchester, Essex, Masconomet, Newburyport, Reading. In the in the math, on your left-hand side, when you look at math, we are 2 out of those 8 schools. Previous year, we were 3, so we were improved. And then when you look at the ELA results, same schools, we are number 1 first out of the 8 schools in our total scores. And then when I switch to this slide, the same in science. We are 1 of 8 and 40 out of 349 schools in science across the state. So when we see the data tonight and you look at each of the breakouts, there is movement all over the charts. One of the things that the state really impressed upon superintendents was their concern. They were very concerned about 3rd grade. 3rd grade still remains flat. And when we think of 3rd grade, go back to COVID, they missed preschool, they missed kindergarten, they may have had a hybrid year, depending on where they were, and then they finally came back into our schools in that 3rd grade realm. So it really makes sense when you think about kids not being in school and kids being in school. So they're really a group that the state will probably shift their focus on next year. There's also a huge push that'll start on Tuesday. There'll be an announcement at the State Board of Education meeting regarding student attendance and kind of an all hands in. There'll be a new process coming from the state that involves parents. They're really going to try to work with the parent groups and get the information out that we need, because as you'll see in the rest of some of these slides, going to school improves your children's school scores. There's no doubt about it in our data. So do you want to stop at each section and do questions, or you want to keep going? This was just kind of a high-level
Yep.
overview.
Anybody have any questions?
Can I just say thank you to all the teachers and TAs, because we never would do this well without them.
Right. It's an amazing shift, and there's still work to do, and we'll continue to do the work. I think everybody understands their role and what we need to do, and we'll continue to work towards it. I mean, part of our focus at the leadership team level is instructional leadership, and part of that work that our teachers are doing is shifting into new curricula and trying to understand new ways to meet the needs of an ever-changing student body. So without further ado, I won't take up much more time. I'm going to shift to the elementary principals, and they will take it from here.
Good evening. Just like our last presentation, you're going to see us sort of collaborating and piggybacking off of each other. So I'm going to start. I'm Carolyn Shediak, principal at the Winthrop School. Thank you for having us. I'm going to talk about our ELA MCAS, and we are talking about the whole elementary group together. Juliana's going to talk about math, and Ben's going to give us some real nuanced details, which is always his expertise. Okay, so starting with grades 3 to 5 all together, I just want to go back and just remind us sort of historically that this is our second year of curriculum implementation for CKLA, and it's our third year using our new literacy intervention model. And I think the play of both of those components in English language arts at the elementary level has had really good results for us, and so we now are continuing that strong foundation that we have. So as you can see here, for all students, and Eric had mentioned earlier about all students versus, and we're going to talk about high need students rather than the lowest quartile. And the high need student subgroup category is defined as students with disabilities, students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, and English learners. So you'll see on all of our slides, this is how we've organized things. And one interesting thing to note is under the all students category, it also includes the high needs students. So for all students, we have seen a 3% growth in proficiency scores overall. There was a slight drop in student growth percentile, but we have seen some upward trends from last year. Our high needs subgroup saw a 1% increase in proficiency, so their scaled score, and a 1.9% increase in their student growth percentile. And as we mentioned, MTSS and our WIN block that we talked to you about during our school improvement plan presentations are going to be critical in continuing an upward trend in ELA. Specifically in third grade, all students, as Eric had mentioned, are generally flat in third grade, but we are still maintaining the gap above the state. We're following the state trend line, but we are still well above the state's scores. One of the positives is that we saw an increase in the students who were exceeding in both the all students category and the high needs student category, which was really exciting. And we're going to continue to look for improvements in grade 3. One of the things that was discussed about the grade 3 students is this is the first time that they are taking an assessment on a Chromebook or on a computer, and so one of the things that we are going to try to do this year is introduce sort of test taking on the computer a little bit earlier so they've got longer to practice, and an initiative, a conscious initiative to do typing clubs so that they have better keyboard skills. So all of those things are at play when we're thinking about third graders taking the test. In fourth grade, we saw all students increase in percentage of proficiency by 7%, with a student growth percentile of 6.9%. For our high need students, the percent of proficient dropped slightly at 3%, but their student growth percentile was 12.1%, which is double that of all students. So that was a real highlight when we think about growth. And then for grade 5, again, we're following the state trend line. We had a slight decline in the average scaled score of 3 points, and we had a 10% decline in the student growth percentile for all students. For our high needs subgroup, though, the percent of students that met proficiency increased by 10%, but the student growth percentile declined a little bit. So it was the number of students who met proficiency, but the growth was not at the same rate. And you can see this, we had a big drop in 2022 in the high needs category in ELA, and so we closed quite a gap there with the students that met proficiency. I'm going to hand this over to Ben.
My name is Ben Schurston. I'm the principal at Bucher Elementary, and I want to talk a little bit about some different ways to look at this data. So when we talk about this data, what we're talking about is the 5th graders in 2018, the 5th graders in 2019, 21, 22, and 23. Those are 5 different groups of children. So this graph is one that Carolyn just had up, and we have this flat line for our 5th graders. But if we look at our 5th graders and compare them to the previous year's 4th graders, which is the same set of kids, that flat line isn't there anymore. And so we go from having more students who are meeting that standard, and similar in terms of the students who are really struggling down here. But that flat line doesn't exist anymore when we start to compare students to the same set of students. That's not how DESE defaults to how they look at data, but when we think about kids as like actual kids, there are places where it looks flat or even it looks negative, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, where we actually have some positive results going on for individual kids.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Juliana Schneider. I'm the principal at Cutler, and I am going to speak to math with Ben also jumping in. So it's important to celebrate a lot of the things that we've seen in ELA across grades 3 to 5, and I am also going to highlight some areas in math. We continue to be above the state average as we go through the data, sort of across the board. When we look more closely at grade 3 math, Eric spoke to this and then Carolyn spoke to this, there is sort of a flatlining trend with 3rd grade. And so you see that with the math. If you look though at the bars under all students, you see that the number of students not meeting expectations has decreased by 10% from 2022 to 2023 there. Similarly, if you look under the graphs under our high need students, here there is a decrease in students not meeting expectations, which shows growth. In our 4th grade math students, the SGP, the student growth percentile, increased by 2.6%, and our high needs students, student growth percentile increased by 8.9%, which is really dramatic in terms of closing gaps for our subgroups. In addition to that, we had students in our high needs group exceed the expectation, which is the first time since 2019.
All right, so let's talk about similar groups of kids. So this 4th grade math on the left-hand side, we have what looks like a little bit of a drop, but that's last year's 4th graders to the previous year's 4th graders, who are not the same kids. If we compare last year's 4th graders to the previous year's 3rd graders, we actually have some growth. We have more kids meeting the standard, going from 3rd to 4th, way fewer kids who are not meeting that standard. Same thing happens with our 4th grade high need students. It looks like we're going down. We're comparing 2 different cohorts of kids. When we compare that same group, we've got a slight increase in students meeting the standard, a slight decrease in students that are not meeting the standard. Despite this looking like we've got a bit of a drop going on. Depending on how we look at this data, we can get some really different stories. And again, like I talked about earlier with ELA, when we start looking at actual cohorts of kids, we have some really positive results.
For fifth grade math, though there was a slight decrease in our scores overall, we remain significantly above the state average, and our high needs population scores meeting expectations increased by 8%. In summary, in terms of the MCAS math data, though there are areas to celebrate, and we saw a lot of wonderful things with ELA, and last year, as you remember, we had our CKLA implementation. We know that we have work to do in the area of math in order to get high quality instructional materials and professional development for our teachers in meeting the needs of all of our students. And there are a few things that we are doing right now in order to do that. The first thing is we're embarking upon a curriculum review process as part of the DESE Grant Implement Massachusetts process. We are in our first phase of this process, which involves looking deeply at the data and discussing to better understand the needs of our students. And our next step will be to establish a math instructional vision, and then we will be looking at mathematical materials and curriculum. So that is underway right now. We have representatives from all 3 elementary schools in our curriculum department, and teachers are really excited about this work and focusing on math. In addition to that, we spoke at our last school committee meeting when we presented our school improvement plans about the master schedules that we have created with our intervention and enrichment blocks. So that is part of our schedule now. Our instructional coaches are being trained in Tier 2 small group intervention curriculum called Bridges, and supporting teachers in implementing interventions for students using data that we are collecting through our screening tools as well as through our assessment tools that we have. And one of the things that's tricky about this data is it's sort of in the past, and so really having good data that we're using on the day-to-day has been incredibly important. The other thing, we're focusing on instruction in the classrooms using exit slips, formative assessment to really accelerate learning, find gaps in the moment, fill those gaps while also teaching grade level material. So there is a lot of work going on in the schools right now to do this and to meet the needs of our students in the area of mathematics while we're also working towards acquiring high-level instructional materials.
All right, so attendance. Eric spoke a lot about attendance in the beginning. And so one of the things that I sort of got thinking about is what would happen if we looked at attendance versus MCAS scores, and would there be a correlation there? And not surprisingly, there is. So I pulled everybody's attendance data from last year. I did a little bit of adjusting. So what I did was I considered a early dismissal or a tardy to be 1/3 of an absence, so that could kind of be a part of what's going on here. We know that when students come in late or leave early, there is instruction they're missing, and that does impact what we're trying to do instructionally. So we have on here all of our ELA scores, all of our math scores, and the 2 trend lines that are on there. So if we look at what these trend lines are saying, if you miss a day of school, it correlates with a 0.35 point drop in your MCAS score. So if you're out for 10 days, that's 3.5 points. So if we think about that 3.5 points, we have 20 students who are within three points of meeting the standard. That are that close. If we pick up those kids, that takes us from a 61% proficiency rate to a 66% proficiency rate. On the math side, it's a little more dramatic. A 0.64 point loss for every day of absence. That brings us to about 6.5 points for being out 10 days, and we have 50 kids that are within 6 points of meeting the standard in math. 50 kids. That's a 13% increase. That brings us from 53% proficient to 66% proficient, puts us at where we were pre-COVID. So when we think about that attendance, that plays a huge piece in this. When we look at the big accountability stuff that Eric had up in the very beginning, we start to really get dinged on those points at 18 absences. But we know that it makes a difference before that. And so if we can find those ways to get those kids back in school, even little shifts are going to have dramatic changes in those proficiency levels because we have so many kids who are so close to meeting that standard.
you want to do elementary questions?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you all have questions? Francesca? Yep, go ahead.
So just for clarification, the groups of high needs, are those children on an IEP, right? Does that include students that are also on a 504 or just IEP?
Yes.
Yes, it includes both, and 504 plans, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's a number of groups in there. There's 504 IEP, that group of students, not all of them, some of them, ELs, any English language learners that we have, and any students that are considered to be low income, based on the state standard. The state determines that.
Okay. And you're saying not all of them?
Correct.
Can you clarify that a little bit? What does that mean? Like,
So you may have a student in the high needs category that's not on an IEP or a 504 or an L student. They may be just low income.
but all of those that are on IEP and are classified as high need?
No,
Okay.
no. Only kids that didn't meet the cut scores. Can you go back one slide? So the kids that are in the bottom in the red, kids that are in that grouping on those charts end up basically in the bottom quartile. Those students will be, some of those students will be students on IEP, but there'll also be students on IEPs in the blue or the gray sections as well.
Oh, yeah. No, that I understand. I just was asking if all the high needs, so the half to the right, so all of the IEPs and 504s are captured there. There's no, that's what I,
No.
so there's someone also,
Some are, yep. It only includes kids with IEPs who didn't meet the proficiency standard.
okay.
So if you had 50 kids on an IEP in a building,
I'm not, I think you guys are answering different questions, I think, because,
High needs group is any student who is on an IEP or is on a
504.
or is designated as low income, or is an English language learner. Some kids might tick off more than one of those boxes.
Okay.
I think that, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I
apologies,
think
that was
that,
my-
right, I
I
think
was
she's
confused
trying to
there.
ask is any person who has an IEP would be in that group,
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
right?
Yes.
Yes. That was, my apologies. That was me.
Yeah.
When we get to
yeah.
lowest quartile, that might include kids not in those subgroups.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, right,
Yes.
Yeah.
Different chart.
okay, yeah, no, it's,
And I really wanted to make sure I understand exactly who is included in there, because obviously there's some, like, we're a little bit lower on some,
Yep.
points there, so I think it will be, food for thoughts, like, we need to, I think, think it through.
yeah.
I think you bring up a good point, and the reality is we're talking about individual children. And one of the things that we've really been mindful of in analyzing this data with our teachers is literally walking through every single child to understand what their needs are, to understand what skills they're coming to us with and where the gaps are. And so we've been able to set goals with teachers to address the needs of each of our students as individuals. And I think sometimes when we look at this data, it's, all these groups and all, but it really does reflect kids who have different stories, and we're pressing into that data in a really intentional way in order to individually make goals to move every child.
Thank you.
You good? And I have a related question, I think. How do you interpret if we're looking at the high needs for all the different, but we can use this one. How do you interpret the difference, or what is your thoughts about the difference between the state high needs and the district high needs? I mean, it's flip-flopped, right? So what is your thoughts about that? Like that's confusing to me about why that would be. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we all are, that it is our focus, is math and high needs.
Part of the dilemma we run into with these scores, and grade 4 is a good example in math, we can track it right down to the standard, and the standard that stands out the most to us as needing attention is number sense and operations. That comes up quite often. It actually has a through line from 3rd grade all the way to 10th grade. It's an issue that will pop up at various grade levels along the way, and this group does show, you know, when you look at each individual student's scores that are set up and broken out by standard, that standard is where kids tend to have the highest level of difficulty. So those are conversations that they'll have in data meetings, but also have with our coach and a classroom teacher. Might be talking about, okay, how do I, you know, improve the way I'm meeting that standard? Or am I, you know, we look at that across our whole curricula and say, where does this number, sense, and operations occur in the curricula? And, you know, you may say, geez, it happens once in October and then it doesn't happen again until December, which isn't true, but I'm just using that as an example. So there could be that type of disparity that's being examined by teachers, coaches, and principals.
So it looks like our big drop was in 2021 in most cases. Some of it was in 2022. And admittedly, I'll blame COVID for some of that, but isn't that also when we basically got the MTSS program in, and so we no longer had to send our high needs language learners away? Because prior to the MTSS program, we didn't have a program for people who were having trouble with language. So they went to Landmark or...
Oh, language-based,
Yeah.
language-based program?
Exactly. So I'm wondering
Correct.
how much of that drop we're seeing in 2021 and 2022 is COVID, and how much of it is now we have students in here that previously would have been sent to a different school because we didn't have the programs to accommodate their needs.
The language-based program has been at Cutler for at least 10 years? Yeah.
Not in its current form.
Yeah, it was changed, just as we went into COVID, there was a transition to improve the program. And we were sending a number of students out. At a point, I think last year, I think there were 22 kids total at the Cutler School in the language-based program. Am I right with that? And you have 9 this year. Yeah, so there's a dramatic shift. It could be an impact point. It's hard to say. It'd be
Yeah.
interesting to go back and look through the data backwards and try to do a comparative. Because the program change, I think, when we came out of COVID, was when we really started
Yeah. No,
building our
exactly.
program.
So I mean, it would be very hard to separate those two variables, but that might be at least explaining some of the difference between our numbers and the state numbers, in particular. And I just wanted to thank you for showing me the same cohort of kids, because I had asked about that last year, and it's definitely an interesting data set.
I think one of the other things that we were just talking about when we're talking about the high needs cohort is because of the size and the number of students we have in those subgroups, one student who has a really tragic year taking MCAS can have a huge impact on.
That was going to be my other questions, like how big is that high needs cohort? Because if you have a ton of variability
And so it's.
in a small
at
number.
Winthrop, we have some sub-separate programs where kids are taking MCAS and they're our neediest with the exception of those that take the MCAS all. So we've got some kids with really big learning needs who are taking MCAS, and that one child could really affect our school.
Exactly.
And one of the things with the quartiles, the lowest quartile is a variable number depending on the school size, school everything. So you could be comparing 250 kids up against 25. And the state takes
agree.
both those averages and mashes them together. So
Yep.
statistically, it doesn't fit. If you were an analyst, you would say, no, no, no.
Yeah.
Did you have another one? Go ahead.
Just a quick comment on the scatter plot data. Very nice work with that.
I like that one, too.
Yes.
Good.
And I was wondering, going back to what we were saying about, students with high needs versus old students. So it seems like there is, just counting the dots, maybe 20-ish kids that didn't go to school for more than 20 days. I wonder if that kind of falls into the high disability category as well. requirements and all that.
And if that, I don't know, just something to think about in terms of when we do
On
the
an individual
analysis.
basis, there are some places where that does correlate, and there are some places where it doesn't. Some of this is medical stuff, some of this is, we had COVID restrictions last year, so if you got COVID, you were out for 5 days regardless. Some of it is vacations on non-vacation weeks where 5 days are gone, because someone's
Yeah,
in Florida.
right.
I mean,
Vacation.
culturally, I think we live in a complicated place right now because people really don't want to get other people sick. And so if your child, even if they don't have COVID, I feel like last year in particular, hopefully we can break away from some of that, but people feel like they're going to infect everyone if they're sending a child with a cold to school. So our attendance rates just need to improve, basically. We have to shift that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to put in, I was also a fan of the scatter graph. I like that.
Ben's our stats guy. Now I have Dr. Best. He will go through the Miles River Middle School data.
I'm jealous, I don't have a scatter graph.
Next year.
Next year.
Very impressive, very impressive. All right, hey, thanks for having us out tonight. I wanted to start with the public-facing graphic because I think it's a nice way to frame our story at Miles River Middle School. The first thing I want to do is highlight that we are in the 90th percentile, 90th accountability percentile. I think that's worth highlighting. We're certainly very proud of that. The other thing that I want to highlight is the growth. If you look at the growth from all of our students to our lowest performing students, it's consistent. Our students are learning, and they're learning in a consistent manner, in a consistent trajectory. However, when you look at our achievement, the story's a little bit different. When you compare the achievement levels from all students to our lowest performing students, it drops a little. And that is kind of the frame for our story in the next few slides. We'll start by taking a look at the average student growth percentile for English language arts. The state average is 50, and that's by definition of a percentile, and we are at 58, I believe that says. So we are exceeding the state average with growth. If you want to take a look by grade, you'll look and see that 6th grade, the average growth is 72, which is quite remarkable, and 7th and 8th are also by individual grade performing above the state average. A similar story for math. We are exceeding the state average with a average growth percentile of 55, and each grade level individually is also exceeding the state average. The other thing that I would point out is that in both cases with ELA and math, a little bit less with ELA, our trajectory is heading in the right direction. Our growth is increasing year over year. And the same is true here for math, that our trajectory is headed in the right direction. And I know my elementary friends were talking about the chronic absenteeism. We were able to get all of our points for reducing chronic absenteeism. We exceeded our target in every measured area. This is also something we're very proud of. I'm sorry, except for low income, in which we made progress, but we did not quite make that target. Last year, for the first time in recent school history, we implemented an attendance team. And that attendance team met periodically to review student data. As they said, there's a lot of reasons a student might be absent. I think the graph is really helpful, but we know that there's a relationship between absenteeism and achievement. One doesn't necessarily cause the other. I think that absenteeism absolutely is a cause of lower grades in some cases. But I also think students' feelings about or struggles with school could sometimes cause absenteeism. And so by meeting as a team, we have our nurse, we have our school counselors, we have the administration. We're all at the table trying to figure out those students' stories so that we can provide the support for them. And as you see from the graph, it paid off nicely last year. So we're continuing that practice this year. When we shift from growth to achievement, this is really highlighting the areas that we need to take a look at. For all students, the graph on the left, math trajectory, and we significantly outperform the state. However, the story is different for our high-need students. Despite an increase in scale score, our growth among high-need students is on a decline. However, for the first time in 3 years, we do have students in the exceeding expectations category that are in our high needs category, so that is something to celebrate. Some of the things that we're working on to address this is we are continuing our practice of screening students using the iReady screener 3 times a year. That way we don't have to wait until the end of the year to know where they are at. We have expanded our support in our intervention enrichment block. We have math teachers that we've examined the data, and we're able to place students in that IE block with math teachers to get specific support in math, and that's not something that we've been able to do in the past. Our 6th graders are using a new program. They're piloting something called Delta Math. That gives even more data for teachers to look at. They might use 3, 4, 5 problems, and they can get a snapshot of student performance and be able to adjust their lessons in real time. And we have licenses for iReady. iReady is our screening tool, but it also has an intervention component. And we, around this time, every year we order licenses for individual students. Maybe these are students who, for whatever reason, couldn't get that additional support in an IE block. This is something that teachers can work with students to assign and get some additional support electronically. When we look at our ELA achievement, the story is very similar for all students. Again, we significantly outperform the state. However, like the state, we are on a flat trajectory. Our achievement has sort of leveled off in the past couple of years. But the story is, again, different for our high-need students. Our achievement among high-need students is on the decline. We're trying to address this in several different ways. Last year, we adopted screening for 6th graders. This is something that our elementary students are accustomed to. We brought that up into the 6th grade last year. It provided some really good information. It was really telling for the teachers. It allowed them to get a better understanding of students' reading abilities. And so we have now expanded that into our 7th and 8th grades this year. And that's a 3 times a year screener. And we're using that data to provide some support through an online Reading Plus program. Historically, students at Miles River that did not have an IEP did not have access to reading support. Many of our students are 1 or 2 levels below. This is not unsurmountable, and so we want to make sure that we're being purposeful about how we are providing that support. Our 6th grade ELA teachers are in the process of a curriculum review. Right now, we do not have an adopted curriculum for ELA. That's not particularly uncommon at the middle and high school levels. It is now becoming a trend where some districts are starting to look at that and think about adopting that curriculum. So we will be reviewing some Tier 1 class curriculums for our ELA this year. I think I said 6th grade. That would be for all of our grades. And I think, yep, that is it. Does anyone have any questions about the middle school slides?
Jen?
Again, more of a comment.
Sure.
When you compare years, like 2022 to 2023, you're really comparing different cohorts.
Yep.
But like Ben did, I would be interested more in seeing how the same cohort is performing as they progress. Because like you might just have a class that is having a lot of people that are struggling. But if that class in between 2022 and 2023 has less people in it that are struggling, that means more to me than a lower average score.
Sure.
So I know you weren't here last year, but just for my own edification, I would love to see those numbers at future, don't worry about it this year, future yearly reports on MCAS.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to provide those. I can tell you that it's a little bit of a tighter grouping, so year to year, we covered 3 years. There's a difference from the lowest to the highest of fewer than 10 points. So it is a bit maybe tighter of a grouping than in some other.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I just am more interested in the trend within a group than between groups. I know the state cares about between groups, but I don't think it tells you as much as within a group does.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree, and I was wondering if once this data is gonna be posted on the website, we'll be able to kind of dig into this and be able to kind of do this kind of analysis on our own, or is it something that?
We don't get the
we won't be able to
nitty-gritty
do it on-
data.
Okay, so yeah.
I'd be happy to. It would not be a difficult exercise at all. I can put that together for you and share.
That's so kind.
Don't put it high on your priority list. You
Yeah,
got
yeah,
other
yeah.
stuff to work on at a
Absolutely.
middle school level.
But like for the future.
I'll
Yeah.
have Ben make me a graph that I can.
There we go.
The scattergraph.
Man, you just got thrown under the bus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the one thing people should know is every school district has an accountability page on the DESI site where you can actually see some more detailed data. Most of their charts are, unlike ours, we have the ability to go in and dig deeper. They are very static, but it gives you some different views of what some of the breakdowns can be. And we can always, dig deeper. Our software that we use to dig into the data allows us to go all the way down to the student level and the individual question level to see, okay, Eric Tracy's score was this, and get down to all the way down to the individual question and see where that question was aligned with a particular
Having
standard.
problems with what
Yep.
type of material.
So it gives our teachers an opportunity to really dig into what's important and not wonder what's happening from the kind of the higher level stuff.
Well,
Problem is, we get it so late in the year that like
I know.
teachers, it's not like you could change your curriculum in what, October, early November?
Yep.
But is there a need, right? Is there, what's the correlation on a personal level, right? Just because a student is sort of not meeting these proficiencies on these standardized tests, what does that look like in the classroom, right? I have a hard time believing that 36% of our students are, failing in our classroom, right? And when they're actually going through the day-to-day rigors of, being in a classroom, that they're actually capable. Like, so at what point do we sort of start thinking about like, okay, where does this, kids who just do not test well on a standardized test, how does that factor in?
And there are those kids.
I think you named 4 different type of measuring systems here. Is there consistency in those numbers between those, 4 different groups? Like I said, are you tracking, are you seeing these students tracking growth within the classroom, right? We hire, we retain, right? Exactly what I said this morning, like we try and attract and retain the best teachers that we can, right? To be sitting there doing the work day after day. Like, I'm a nerd, I like this stuff, but at the same time, it's also useless. And when you and it's dangerous to sort of post it. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Like, and it can sometimes do more harm than good. You post these numbers on the website, and so it's easy. I mean, I can name the names of people that are going to be like, oh, look at these horrible numbers that we're doing. Meanwhile, you meet the kids in our class, in our classes, and they're bright, they're brilliant, they're they're very successful in individual ways, right? So it's like I always like to sort of try and remind everyone to look at this stuff with a grain of salt, because this does not really reflect individuals that we actually have within our community.
Yeah.
And that and like this high needs group is so it's just like I can tell you personally, like, just how skewed these numbers are by like names.
I'd like to yield my time to the gentleman from.
I do you would like.
We talk about those the individual pieces of that. I ended up calling a parent last week as MCAS scores were going out to say, hey, look, like the scores are going to go back, and for this particular kid, they're really, really low. And I know from talking with the classroom teacher that this kid's got some attentional issues, and we have a test that's designed to take 90 minutes, 120 minutes. He spent 17 minutes on it. And that was an act of self-preservation to be like, no, I'm not doing this today. but he's on there on the graph.
Yeah.
I have some local assessment data, so I have a good picture of where he is, but the MCAS is not that good picture of where he is.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I like I said, like I love sort of seeing all this stuff, like it's like so cool in one way, but at the same time, like, you know, we can't go too overboard because there is such that individual component of.
I-
May I answer one of your questions, which was, do we ever compare data? Because there are a lot of things that we're looking at. The answer is yes. So for example, we compare our iReady data to our math MCAS. So we've got the last iReady that the student took, say as a 6th grader, their 6th grade MCAS, and the first iReady that they took is 7th grade. And when you look at it, it is consistent. So the students that score low on iReady are scoring low on MCAS, all the way up through the students that are scoring high on one are scoring high on the other. The iReady for us at the middle school does tend to sort of slightly overrepresent proficiency, but it's still a good indicator for us. It's still a tool that we can use to say, here's a snapshot, it's not the whole picture, but it's worth digging into to see where we're at and what that student might need.
Yeah. From a curricular perspective, I wouldn't go down to the individual student, but like I got Alita's science MCAS back a week and a half ago or something, and like it separated it out into topics. And you know, if you've got 90% of your students having a hard time with evolution, and I totally making up numbers here, then maybe, you know, the biology people who teach biology probably look at that and say like, maybe we need to spend a little more time right before the MCAS just reviewing that evolution stuff. Yeah, that's what I was thinking more in terms of curriculum.
So, like,
It's hard. I mean, if you're a 10th grade teacher, people look at you because you're you're the goal.
Yeah.
You know, you're
No,
the
I
goal
know.
line. And if you're a 10th grade teacher, there's a lot of pressure. I live with a 10th, well, she teaches
10th,
11th
9th.
now, but she was
Hopefully not
teaching
after November.
10th grade when you're looking at math and English, 9th grade for
Yeah.
science. You know, there's a lot of pressure there
Yeah.
to make sure, and our kids make it, and our kids get through, and our kids go to great schools, so.
I'm not worried about
I don't get too worried about it, and along the way, we can watch this growth along the way, and we see kids grow, as we know, in so many more ways than a single tiny snapshot of their career through 180 days of school.
So you asked about that curriculum piece. Some of the conversations we have at the elementary level are kind of two pieces. One is, if I as a 4th grade teacher, I'm going to look at last year's 4th grade data, and how did we do as a whole? And one of the things that we can look at is each question, what was the standard addressed, and what percentage of kids got that question right or wrong.
Yeah.
And so I can look at those things that those kids struggle with. Also, what I can do as a 4th grade teacher is pull the 3rd grade data and look at the kids that are coming into my classroom, where are the places that they struggle to
Yeah.
inform how I'm going to teach with them this year.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot of information you can get out of it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I know you guys are.
All right, thank you very much.
Now we'll shift to Brian
Yep.
Menegoni for the high school. I will, there's one caveat, you're probably missing some slides if you print it out, because I believe I deleted some of Brian's slides without knowing it.
Oh.
And there are a few slides that we had to add back in, but they are the correct ones. They will be posted as soon as we're done this meeting.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you tonight about MCAS results in the high school for ELA math and science, and also dig a little bit into our accountability data. Just so you know, in high school, we only test at 2 grade levels. Science is tested in grade 9, specifically the biology test, and then in grade 10 is when we do the ELA and math tests. First of all, ELA achievement last year. As you can see, 88% of our students hit proficiency, which is a great number, and I'll set some context to that in a little bit. But what I think is important to note is the gap between all students and our high need students. MCAS is never a target for us, but it is an indicator, and it's an indicator that something is going on. So what bears, I think, further investigation is what's making up that gap. And that certainly comes about over the experience of being in school for 10 years to that point. And so we want to learn more about that and what are some of the things that we can do to help build kids' ELA skills. So what are we doing in the high school to help address this gap? Well, right now, we just started today, actually, piloting a literacy screener. I used to think that doing literacy type work in the high school seems a little bit late. However, clearly there's a need to gather more information about how our students are doing with respect to ELA. So we started that today, and what that's going to allow us to do is let the teachers know that these are the kids we have some concerns about, and they may already have concerns, but now we have some more granular data to share with the teachers, and it's more real-time data. I've often said that MCAS is it's kind of like autopsy data. It's already happened and the kids have moved on. Whereas using the screener data now, the kids are here, they're with us, and we can take immediate action. We also have 9th and 10th grade support blocks, and what that allows us to do is to have the teachers who are in charge of those support blocks make sure that the English teachers of students who are at risk are aware of what's going on, and we can help set up assistance for those students. But like I said, the big thing over time is to figure out what are our kids not receiving in ELA, and what can we do to fill in those gaps. Math, you see a similar thing where our students are above 80% proficiency, which is much higher than the state average. However, our high needs students, there's a gap again, and they're kind of oscillating over time around that state average. So again, what is it that the students are not getting in math who are in that high needs group, and what can we do to help? So the steps that we're taking so far is we have been actively using a math screener at the high school. We piloted it last year, used it this year to identify students who are in need of assistance with math skills, and they are directed to a math-specific support block where the teacher can plan instruction in there to address the concerns of particular students. And so that's where we're at with math right now in the high school. Science achievement, there were just 2 years of data available. There's been a change in the science test over the past couple of years, so that's probably the reason for only having a couple of years of data. But what you can see for both the all students group and high needs group, that the results were better this year as compared to the previous year. However, there still is that gap again between high needs and all students. We will need to continue to dig into those as we move on. What I'm going to guess is that as we look into math and ELA, what is that gap about? That's going to also inform what's going on in science as well a little bit. When I asked today, what may have caused that sort of big increase between 22 and 23 in terms of science achievement, the teachers let me know. Well, you got to remember, you're just looking at 2 years of data. That line, although it looks like there's been a big increase, might flatten out as you look at additional years a little bit. Also, the format of the test changed a little bit, and it's more tightly aligned with how we teach science in the classroom, so I think the kids just have more comfort with the test now that they've actually experienced some of the things in class directly. But the thing I want to point out about MCAS in high school is that there's actually accountability at the individual student level, because kids need to pass the ELA, the math, and the science test as part of earning a high school diploma. Okay, and that's unique to high school, where kids have to meet a minimum score. Now, interestingly enough, just because a kid passed the MCAS does not mean that they've met expectations according to the standards of MCAS. I would expect that that's going to change over time as the state decides to raise the cut scores for different things. But what really happens right now for ELA, for example, students need to achieve a minimum score of a 456, where if you look up there, 456 falls squarely in the middle of not meeting expectations. However, students who get in that 456 to 471 range are put on what's called an educational proficiency plan, where we're just aware of the fact that they do have some deficiencies in their ELA, and we need to make sure that they pass 4 years of English, which they need to do anyways in order to graduate from high school. With math, it's a little bit different in that the minimum passing score at least is aligned with partially meeting, and kids who fall in that 470 to 485 range also will need an educational proficiency plan, and really that's just to make sure that they take 4 years of math, which again is one of our graduation requirements anyways. And for science, there really is just one minimum score, and there's no educational proficiency plan tied to that. But again, the big difference here in high school is that the students actually, they have to pass the test in order to graduate from high school. Now, in the 14 or so years that I've been here, we've never had a kid not graduate because of MCAS. So it's, again, MCAS is not really a huge concern in the high school because it's one grade level.
Right.
We're really concerned, do you pass it or not? And they just really always do. But I think it is a good indicator of other things that are going on, okay? In addition to the other accountability measures that are really at the student level. I mean, grades, kids are accountable for their grades. If they don't pass classes, they don't earn credits, they don't graduate. There are also other testing things that are out there, SAT, ACT, and AP scores. Those all impact students in some way. We need to take a look at those as well to see what it's saying about the high school experience. This just shows a little bit about where our school falls relative to Cape Ann League schools. Cape Ann League, that's our athletic conference that we're in, but they're also our partner schools. We speak monthly as principals, so I think it's a good comparison group. So for ELA this year, and it's pretty typical, we tend to fall near the top scores Cape Ann League. However, our high needs students over here not always near the top scorers in Cape Ann League, so that sort of raises some questions in my mind a little bit, but still we do relatively well. For math, same thing. We typically score near the top of all Cape Ann League schools, and then in addition, our high needs students generally are near the top scorers in Cape Ann League schools as well. So I'm just offering that really kind of as some context to see how we do relative to schools in the area. And then the high school accountability results. There's some extra layers for high school kids, in particular, because they have to graduate. They have to earn credits and make it through all of our graduation requirements. Also, some of the advanced coursework that Eric spoke about earlier. And chronic absenteeism is something that I also want to just talk about in a little bit more detail. The first thing that you would notice is that our high school completion total in the accountability scheme for last year, we only received 2 out of 12 points, okay? And that's actually a little startling, okay? Because typically everybody who starts high school graduates from high school. That's been my experience. But the way that this is actually calculated, okay, is it's calculated comparing one year to the next year, and did you meet your target, okay? So in 2021, we had a certain percentage of kids graduate from the high school, which I'm gonna guess off the top of my head was near 100%. The next year, we had a few kids not make it. Okay, they had to drop out of high school for various reasons. And because we actually declined in our graduation rate, we just didn't meet the target and we didn't get any points. So that explains that. So from year to year, that can happen. When you look historically how we do with respect to high school completion rate, it's generally very strong. But this particular cohort, we saw that happen. Also, there's a lag of 1 year as compared to the MCAS data. You're seeing MCAS results from spring of 23. The high school completion total is calculated using the change from 2021 to 2022. The class of 23 is not included in that, okay? But still, I would want to know more about why it dropped, that happened that year, okay? And it also has to do, it's also impacted by high needs students. Our high needs students were identified as those, you know, who were the dropouts. And so it's another reason why we didn't do that well in that category. advanced coursework completion, we only got 1 out of 4 points there. And that's because our high need students weren't completing advanced courses at the same rate as all students. Now, interestingly enough, every kid who graduates from the high school has to take an advanced course because of the graduation requirements that we have and the courses that we offer to meet those. However, the advanced coursework looks at kids taking advanced courses in grades 11 and 12. And every kid has to take an advanced course in grade 12, but not everybody's going to get to it in grade 11. And so our high need students, when I looked into the data, many were not taking an advanced course until grade 12. And I think that's really important to point this out, because advanced courses do impact a kid's next step beyond high school, because colleges are looking at their transcript. They want to see that kids are taking the most difficult courses that we have, and they're not asking, are you in the high needs category or not? They're not going to give them anything for that. So we need to think about what are the things that we need to put into place well before grades 11 and 12 to offer kids more opportunities to take advanced courses. So those two things were kind of the bad news. The good news is we got all of our attendance points. Kids like to come to school. That's what it looks like. In fact, we actually exceeded our target. We obviously saw a big dip in attendance because of the pandemic. However, we quickly recovered and went way beyond the targets that the state set for us. Part of it is we've been I think very on top of communicating with families when students are out. Also, the fact that it is high school and kids who want to play sports have to show up to school. Kids need to show up to school in order to do well enough to get credits to graduate. So some of those individual accountability things actually encourage kids to come into school. So that's what I have for you from the high school. Any questions?
Questions?
This is more of it's not a high school-based question, but it's this classification thing. Is it always going to be a year-to-year comparison?
By the state? Yeah, that's the model they've used since MCAS started. Doesn't mean we have to look at it that way. I mean, the beauty of the system that we're using to look at the data, we can, as Ben showed, we can go and pull comparative data so that you're comparing apples to apples instead of apples to grapes. And that's really the presentation can shift depending on how and what data you're looking at.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you're just comparing one year to the next year, like even a small change can cause that number to vacillate hugely.
Yep. And we've seen, I mean, you can ask any principal, we have individual groups that will go through our school district that will score slightly lower consistently all the way through. And that's what Dave Polito was talking about. It's that one snapshot and that's it. And then another year later, here's another snapshot and there's another, but I think Brian kind of capped it off well by saying, even though a kid doesn't hit, quote, passing in high school, they still are expected by the state. Like, we literally have to go in and prove to the state that a student who may not have hit the passing score in MCAS in math passed Algebra 2. And that's a requirement of what we have to do with that EPP process. So they really, in a lot of ways, kids that may not, quote, test well, and there are kids that don't test well, they're taking our courses and passing our courses and advancing on into college and future endeavors.
I was just gonna say one more thing. These high needs numbers sort of concern me a little bit because, like we both know they're skewed, right? Because since they include everyone with like a 504 and IEP, I could think of, off the top of my head, probably about a dozen of my students right next door, Beverly, that are straight A students but are on a 504 and IEP. So if you actually take them into consideration, because I'm sure that's the same thing here, they're very, very similar districts in a lot of ways, that if you sort of cut those off the top, and this number's already sort of surprisingly low, right? Then like are we sort of starting to look at like what that number really looks like, and why are we like so low with that?
Yeah, I think the difficult thing about, that's the only subgroup that we have at the high school too, because we're testing a single grade level,
Yeah.
and we don't hit that minimum number of students to get any data from the state on it.
Yeah.
So in order to have a subgroup, we have to add together our low-income students, students with disabilities, our Ls, to get a subgroup at all.
Right.
If you disaggregated the data, yeah, I'm sure you'd probably see a very different story.
Yep.
So yeah, that just sort of seemed odd to me.
Yeah.
Just sort of knowing what, like, because I'm always like, wow, why is this person on 504? And I look like, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know.
I know I'm kind of putting every single person on the spot here, but one of the MASC resolutions that's coming out of the Framingham School is the elimination and moratorium on MCAS. If you have an opinion, it's fine if you don't. Would you, if it was your personal choice and you could get rid of
We
MCAS,
have to
would
vote
you?
on this later.
In her defense, we literally have to vote on this in
Yeah,
about
like
5 minutes.
this is
so
our
she's
next
asking
thing that
questions.
we're voting on.
It's a real question that we
I'll
really.
put my resident hat on and just sit in the audience, I guess, and abstain from answering that.
Citizens' comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a big question. I'd have to think about that. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
mind some sort of a competency test. Like a kid, I think, should be able to show that they have some minimum skills before they get a high school diploma, in addition to all the coursework they've done. But does that have to be MCAS? I don't know. I mean, some other states use SAT as their test. There's probably benefits to that, and there's a lot of drawbacks that I could think
Yeah.
of as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the state's also growing this MCAS system where this year we've been voluntold that we are taking part in a pilot for social studies and for science in grades 5 through 8. And this new science pilot is more performance-based, and we don't know what that means. So I think you're going tomorrow, aren't you? I think some of our principals are going to the state overview of this new system so that we can start to get an understanding of what's going on. But they are piloting it this year with 2 of our grades, and schools are just not ready for it. And I think that's the kind of the difficult part, where MCAS measures like the ones that we just got hit with, no one knew their targets on day one.
Yeah.
So and I think what we'll find is if you miss your targets, your target extends further out next year. So there are flaws in the math, the data, if you will, and I explained that earlier with averaging averages, which is ask any statistician you know, and they will tell you that's a no-no unless you weight it based on the N of, in this case, students. So there are a lot of, it's good and bad. I mean, it gives us a tiny snapshot, but I think Zach summed it up where he said we're using along the way assessments now that we can compare to get a better idea of where kids sit in September versus this January versus May and June. So I think the systems that we're putting in place ultimately will be the better reality for our kids as they travel through the district.
Thank you. That answers my question. So I appreciate it.
I also think it's interesting to look at the elementary data compared to the high school data.
Yeah.
Because kids are still developmentally all over the place in elementary schools, and a lot of those gaps close just through development. And so it can be exceedingly stressful for young children to go through that testing when ultimately I think as they get older, it kind of, the gaps fill in.
Yeah, I mean, we're all talking tonight.
I was going to add, I absolutely agree with Mr. Menegoni. Like, the idea of a competency test makes sense. I think we
Yeah,
have to do that. I would just add, and this is kind of related to what you said, I took one of these when I was in 6th grade. It was like a paper with a pencil. And I didn't think it was another day of
Bubbles.
school, right? And now, a few years later, I'm hearing the word anxiety from kids
Yeah.
related to testing, and that's what I think. And by the way, kids at least at the age that I work with are wonderful mirrors of adults. And so somewhere along the line, we as the adults have developed some feeling about this that we are now passing on.
one question, yeah.
There was a huge, I shouldn't say huge, there were a number of kids who had that. We then triangulate with our DIBELS data for ELA, and then we look at our curriculum-based assessments and say, was this a bad day for this kid? I had a similar student who was done with every MCAS in under 32 minutes, and the scores were not great. So, but it's a kid who's really capable, and if you look at all her classwork and her DIBELS, she's just fine. She just did not want to put any effort into taking the silly test.
The last thing I'll say about it is that it takes over for spring. And so the amount of time we lose as administrators, teachers lose in teaching time, it's legitimate. Like, it's all encompassing. You're shaking your head. It really is. So I don't know if it's worth that. I didn't realize my opinions about this were as strong as they are.
But it's good to
Oh,
hear,
so
because everybody
and this
has
is
their
actually-
own, but you
Thank you
guys
for
are
that.
boots on the ground.
Yeah.
This just actually was gonna, it's funny that you just mentioned that. Next time we sort of meet together like a group, can I suggest maybe getting everyone a seat at our table? So we
Yeah.
could actually, no, I'm dead serious. I
We can do
actually
that.
probably learn more in that just little off,
Yeah.
like, off-script conversation that it was really
Yeah.
much more meaningful to me than, not that your presentations aren't wonderful, but, that really carries more weight. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay. All right. Our next agenda item is the MASC resolution vote, which Jen brought us right to.
Sorry, I had to
Beautiful
ask.
segue.
Very nice, very nice. So I am going to just ask the committee if you're okay. I have a thought on how to structure this. I want to just start by saying that basically each year the MCAS, I'm our delegate that's going to the MCAS conference in November. And each year there are resolutions that are proposed by various districts that are brought to the conference, and it's basically like a giant school committee meeting, and these resolutions are brought up, someone makes a motion, someone seconds it, it's debated, discussed, and then there are votes on whether we want these resolutions to be brought forth by the MASC. And our past practice on our school committee, which is, I've learned, not the way all school committees do it, but the way our past practice has been, is for us to bring these resolutions here to get your input and to direct the delegate on how to vote on these various resolutions. So that's the purpose here, and my thought about structuring it is that there are 7 of them. I thought I might just read the title of each one, and if someone wants to hold it for discussion, much like one would do with a consent agenda, I'd ask that. I'm open if you all want to go through each one of them, we can do that too. I actually have more than one that I personally am going to hold, so I don't know how people feel about that.
That's probably the best way to go
Okay.
about it.
People feel good? Okay, so I'm just going to read them. Let me know if you want to hold any of them, and Francesca, our secretary, can take note on which one we're holding. Okay, resolution number 1, full stable funding for Metco. Resolution number 2, regarding investigations and recommendations for transportation bidding procedures.
I would like to hold that.
Okay, as would I. Okay. Resolution number 3, regional transportation.
Probably hold that.
Okay. Resolution number 4, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm actually going to hold that one. We may not have a lot on our. Resolution number 5, Massachusetts School Building Authority.
We'll hold that too.
Resolution number 6, School Bus Stop Arms Surveillance Act and Enforcement and Penalties. Okay. Resolution number 7, related to MCAS.
I would have said hold until I talked to them.
I'm going to hold it.
Okay.
And resolution number 8, safe storage of firearms. I'm going to hold that one also. So
Okay.
I made this more difficult, I guess. Okay, I don't know what we had left, Francesca, but if you would be willing to make a motion on the,
So I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee adopt and authorize Dana Olara, MASC delegate, to vote to affirm the proposed MASC resolutions for formal consideration by 2023 MASC Delegate Assembly in November as written, with the exception of the resolutions number, forgot them all. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8.
Second.
okay, we have a second by Amy. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, and that is unanimous of the 5 members present, and the motion passes. Just for my own clarification, so my understanding is that then I am being instructed to vote in the affirmative on resolution number 1, number 6.
Correct.
That's it, right? Okay. All right. All right, number 2, I believe, Jen, I think that you held that one, and I had a question on that one, too. Why don't you start?
So my problem with this one is that they're asking the state to try and do something that is probably not possible for the state to do, because they're asking the state to present findings and recommendations in order to contain costs. And in the previous statement, they defined that they need to contain costs because often there's only one bid on transportation. But I don't think the state can legislate having multiple companies bid on a transportation contract.
So I'm
And
gonna.
so I think it's an overreach.
I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna ask if Vinny has any thoughts on this one.
I think what they're trying to do is get more companies to bid on individual school contracts. Just like ours, we only had one company bid on
But-
our.
And I would love to have more companies bid on projects. I would. But I don't think the state can mandate that.
Well, I think that what they're looking at is the fact that there's sort of this unwritten rule amongst bus companies that you don't encroach on another person's area.
I didn't want to say that.
Right.
I was
Didn't
about to
wanna
say the
keep-
same thing,
So
yeah.
like the investigation is more, are they doing some
Is there some
maybe
type of
not
monopoly?
fully illegal, but
Monopoly, I
not
think is the word, yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
legal, and trying to, my interpretation of this is that they're sort of trying to force the hand of enforcing a law that's sort of already on the books, and it's an open bidding process, and see if they can, try and keep some of the
Yeah, so,
strong arming, get rid of some of that strong arming.
Can I jump
okay.
in for 1 second?
And I think that's within the state's purview, yeah.
Yeah.
Eric, did
Yeah,
you
I
have
think
something to add?
One of the things that we've seen in the state in the last probably 5 to 7 years is that there's an overarching, a larger company that's international called Beacon Transportation. They've purchased up all the small bus companies, so Salter and RT, so they can control that. And I think that's what this resolution's asking, can we investigate this and see if it's real? Because I think that's what superintendents are really saying, there's something up here when all the local small companies are owned by one major corporation, and this includes a lot of the special ed transportation as well. So there's a possibility that, you're paying in some cases $300 a day to bring one kid on a
No.
minivan to another town or city, or $500 a trip to bring a busload of kids to an athletic event. And are there realities to those numbers, or is it something that's being heavy-handed or forced into place because of the way the bus companies are structured?
Okay, is there further discussion?
Yeah, no, I withdraw my,
You don't have to withdraw anything, we're gonna vote.
Discussion.
Yeah, it's just discussion. I think we're ready for a motion.
So, and I just need I have a little question. How the more
Yep, sure.
in this case,
I think technically, yes, which is a pain in the neck.
I will just word it to say, well,
I think you can adjust how you see fit, but yeah, basically we're directing the delegate to vote in the affirmative on resolution number 2. Yeah,
okay, specific, so we'll have to do it for each and every one.
yeah, but yeah, you don't have to, yeah.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee adopt and authorize Dana Alara and mass delegate to vote to affirm on the proposed mass resolution number 2.
Second.
Second by Jen Carr. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Okay, and the motion unanimously passes of the 5 members present, and I will make a note of that. Next up is resolution number 3, regional transportation. I think I was the one that flagged this.
I did too.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I
I really want to just ask again, Vinny, what your thoughts are on this. This particular, I mean, it gives a specific about in a case where the pupil resides greater than 1.5 mile from the school of attendance. I just don't know. Like, it seems like it doesn't match what we're doing, and
So the state originally set it up that if you're a regional school district, they'll reimburse you for your transportation
Correct.
costs. For us, they actually don't end up reimbursing us all of it. It ends up being about 50%. So they don't give you a penny for anyone that lives within 1.5 miles of the school, so they're excluded completely. And then they'll calculate only about 80% of the cost for the people that are over 1.5 miles.
so does,
Calculate the 1.5 miles?
We do. We report to
So
them how
do you-
many are over 1.
so,
Do we use a map, or do we use the wording
Use
that they have
Google
in here?
Maps to calculate.
So
exactly
through,
where they
down the,
wait, can I just ask a clarification question? Because I do think that helped a lot, what you just said, because it sounds like what this is addressing then is that part where we're not receiving the full 100% for the people outside. So it wouldn't affect the part
Of inside.
of the inside.
Just the
Because that was
outside.
kind of part of what I was looking at, was it affecting that. So this, my understanding then of this is that it really would be us just saying we would like to be reimbursed the whole 100%
The whole
as.
100% of the over 1 point.
All right, thank you.
Right now, it's about 80% of the
That last year
cost.
or the year before, didn't we get a higher amount than usual?
It changes every year
Changes every
depending
year.
on the state's budget and how much the whole state spends
Okay,
on it.
but they've promised us 100,
100%.
and we don't get
It's never
100.
been
Okay,
But my problem with this resolution is not like the state should pay us. My problem is saying that the regional school district can charge parents a fee.
which is the way municipalities are.
We can
But-
charge for it, but we don't.
right, because I
And-
think that's already part of the
But
statute.
I mean, I just don't think parents who live more than 1.5 miles away from school should have to pay for transportation. And this resolution is giving the power of regional school districts to do exactly that.
But we already have that
See,
power.
I was not, I actually thought that what Jen is saying, I mean, I will defer to you if you, I thought we couldn't do that, and that,
We can.
in other words,
Manchester-
municipalities can do that, I know,
The next
but,
regional over does it.
Manchester Essex charges for
Really?
transportation.
all right.
Don't
So-
like that.
They don't get reimbursed for it, though.
Right.
So they'll charge the students, but the state takes it right off the top when calculating.
Well, so maybe that, so it's just not a,
It's a, right. it-
But the- I
it can
mean,
only be
whether
a
the-
percentage of the balance of what the state's not paying, realistically.
so this,
But again, I mean, if the state is then taking that off what they pay you, what we're doing is we're putting the burden on the parents and not on the state where it should
That's
be.
why we don't do it.
That's why we don't do it.
Yeah,
Discretion of the school district to decide whether to.
The school district decides.
yeah.
Yep.
My problem is just, like, it very clearly puts it on the parents, and I don't think it should be. Whether we do it or not, this is statewide, and I don't think any school district should be able to say, well, you know what? you decided to live more than 1.5 miles from Manchester High School, so we're gonna charge you an extra $5 every single day to go to public
Melrose
school.
instead have buses.
Yeah, that's really, as I'm reading this, that is, I guess I might need to read this more deeply, because it seems to me like that it does read as if we would be pushing to change the law to read that they are allowed, that we would be allowed to charge. And you're
But the
saying,
law already reads that way.
well, I know, I'm just saying,
Then
I'm reading it, it
Oh,
says,
what you're
it
saying- It
says,
sounds like we're saying, yes.
I'm just reading it, it says that MASC encouraged the legislature to modify the Mass General Law with the aforementioned proposed language to provide regional districts the ability to charge a transportation fee. So,
I would then just sort of argue that we stated this way, and again, just for sort of clarification, it's probably just stated this way so that it's only changing, certain amounts of the wording of the existing statute,
yeah, okay.
as poorly written as it is.
Yeah, and I will tell you again, I guess this is an aside, but I have been a couple times, and those kinds of questions will get answered. It's like a regular school committee meeting. People ask those questions, people will speak to it in the room, like there are conversations about it in the room.
Yeah, I mean, if this was changed to just say, okay, state, you need to pay what you promised you'd pay, 100% of the regional costs for transportation, I would be like, sure, no problem. But I don't.
My guess would be, and it's only an educated guess here,
Yeah.
that it is written this way so that it actually carries more weight going up to the House and State Senate, because then they couldn't argue back, well, oh, you took out this wording about not being able to charge people from here, and then they could use that as a way to knock it down by changing only certain parts of the wording, trying to get it through, this has been coming up again and again and again, and they always find reasons why they can't pay us 100% that was promised initially at 40 years ago, 45 years ago, whatever it came about.
Okay.
That's just sort of my guess.
We didn't start with a motion, did we?
No.
Okay, maybe we should have. Okay, so can you make a motion, please?
That the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee adopt and authorize Dana Lara as delegate to vote to affirm the proposed mass resolution number 3.
Second.
Second by David Polito. Is there any further discussion? No. All right, all those in favor? That is 3 in favor. Those opposed? 1 opposed. Any abstentions? Okay, so it is 3 to 1 to 0, and the motion passes. Okay, and I'm okay if we could have just a friendly, if we're okay to have Francesca not have to read that torturously long thing, we could just, if you could, and maybe start us off for number 4, just with a shorter motion, and we'll all assume that you said the longer thing.
Yes.
So I move that, I move that we authorize Dana Lara to vote to affirm the proposed mass.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Jen Carr. Okay, I held this one. I held it because the recommendation is to recommend that all districts adopt the position of a DEI coordinator to work towards an anti-racist school system. I wanted to ask Eric about, that's another position in the district that would be mandated, and I was just interested in, I noticed afterwards that it does not actually say that this needs to be a full-time position, but I just wanted to ask about cost and the work and what you see other districts doing.
And I think it really lends to a district of some size. So Beverly has a DEIB coordinator. They also have a fairly substantial amount of grant money that comes in to be able to pay for those positions. We do not have grant money that comes in for DEIB anything. We're more integrated in our approach, whereas there are very much DEIB coordinator down approach. So I think it's harder for smaller school districts to mandate positions like this for a million reasons, because budgets are getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and they're going to continue to get tighter. And I think if you're really running into issues that you see this need arise, then you bring it forward and say, we need this and this is why. I really find it difficult to mandate something that may be handled differently in different communities, depending on the makeup of their community. Realistically, I mean, some of the issues that a community like Beverly or Lowell or Lawrence will run into versus Hamilton Wenham are very different, and dramatically different in some cases. So I think this is one that each community should be able to consider and decide on their own based on the realities of what is happening in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion in their school districts.
Other questions, concerns? Okay, we're ready to vote? All right, so the motion is to direct the delegate to vote in the affirmative on resolution number 4. All those in favor? 1. Those opposed?
It just feels bad to oppose the idea,
I'm
but
the one that has to vote in the room.
I know, but I, like,
We have one.
No, we don't.
So, but it's not a paid position, but we actually have a DEIB coordinator.
Yeah. Right.
right, I think just the language of it is what I'm, to your point about, like, every district
All
doesn't
right,
need.
so not to be too much of a stickler, but we already voted.
We already voted, we voted.
And the motion fails.
Not a lone position, I guess. It's a combined.
And, you know, I'm the one that gets to be in the room voting on that. Okay, can we have to start us off, can we have a motion for the next one, please?
Yeah, I move that we authorize Dana and Lara to vote to affirm the proposed resolution number 5.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. I think, David, did you hold this one?
Yeah,
Yep.
just, I think, you know, since we've gone through this process, you know, now for the past half dozen years, one of the reasons why, it did take us so long and so many different attempts to sort of get in there, right, is that there's only a limited supply of money. So the thought of, expanding the cap in the state, I think is something that we have sort of witnessed firsthand, and that we want to definitely support as we go through the process, and we see the importance of, being able to hopefully get this work done with the help of the state, that there are other communities that, throughout the state that really need this assistance also, and that this is a really good thing. So I just wanted to make sure that we were just addressing that, being, members of, or sort of reaping the benefits of this at the moment.
So my question for you, David, because this was my only concern with this one, was that if they reinstitute this accelerated repair program, and they remove the cap, which to me sounds like a good idea, but is the state then going to be telling schools, we don't need a new school? We don't want to pay for a new school.
My understanding of the accelerated.
But we'll repair
Well,
this.
no, it's like if a boiler blows up.
Yeah.
Right, and like you don't have time to go and, go through the process. This accelerated program, to my understanding, I wish Tom was here to, could speak to it more, is that it's those emergency situations.
Okay,
part of
so
the
it's,
roof
we
caves
need
in.
money for a roof right now.
Right now.
Okay.
And it's a.
I thought it was
much more expedited process.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was the emergency program or if this was the well, you know, our boiler's getting pretty old, and we should probably replace it sometime in the next 3 years, type
Correct-
thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think, isn't one of our projects, like, sort of sidebar because this got?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the high school roof.
Yeah, the roof, right?
Yeah, the
So-
accelerated repair program allows you for bigger items, but that are not multi-million-dollar buildings, like a roof or window sets or boiler issues. So again, you've seen what we've been through with the roof. You go through this process, but there was always money available. Last year, they took the $75 million that was allotted for accelerated repairs, and they shifted it to the core program because the costs were rising so fast in school builds that, you know, communities, and I can't remember, I think might have been Newton, they started a project at $200 million and ended up at $280 million by the time it was done. So they tried to offset those costs for communities that were running into those problems with the money they had.
Okay. Is there any other further discussion? All right, looks like we're ready to vote. Vote is on affirming resolution or directing the delegate to vote in the affirmative on resolution number 5. All those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 5 members present, and the motion passes. Okay, moving on to number 7. This is, go, I'll let you start, yep.
I move that we authorize Dana Alara to vote to affirm the proposed mass resolution number 7.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by David Polito. I don't know, I think I might, it was probably me that held it, just because I am a little bit on the fence. I don't know.
I like the first 2 resolutions in that, the evaluation and the consensus building strategy for evaluation. And I like the 4th. The 3rd is the one that bothers me.
Yep, that's how
Like-
I feel.
Right, I feel like they need to have something in place.
That's
Yeah,
my favorite.
before-
Get rid of all the rest.
So come up with a new one, but while you're coming up with a new one, which is not an instantaneous process,
Right.
eliminate it completely.
That's, yeah.
And that, I don't know, would that affect federal funding though?
Excuse me?
Wouldn't that affect federal funding through No Child Left Behind?
Yeah,
There's
I
a
mean,
requirement for some sort of an assessment system.
Yeah,
Which-
that's what I thought.
That's why I feel like it's uncomfortable to remove it completely without having some sort of
on
replacement.
the other hand, I don't know. I mean,
I don't like MCAS, but I don't like losing, and I don't mind replacing MCAS, which it sounds like was the general consensus there. But I don't,
Well,
I also don't want to lose federal funding.
The consensus is, well, so you could have MCAS, but it just isn't a requirement for graduation.
But they're saying stop it completely.
Oh, yeah, and again, I still agree with that, but.
I would agree with it if it wouldn't affect our funding.
Stop it until they come up with a better.
yeah, I mean, it's saying develop a wider, more consensus-built strategy for evaluation systems. with
I'm
meaning.
more curious about what's going to happen, in November with the vote, which I think could be far more damaging than this, because this
Yeah.
is a more controlled environment,
Yeah, well,
you know, theoretically.
In
it
theory.
gets a little feisty, but, all right, well,
Next year I'm going. Like, I've already told him earlier, I'm like, I
it'll be
gotta go.
fun. It's like a party. All right, are we ready to vote? Okay. The motion is for, to affirm resolution numbers, or delegate to affirm resolution number 7. All those in favor? That is reluctantly 5.
Not reluctant, I was up first.
No, I wasn't even,
All right.
I wasn't even looking at you.
Hey, it's not all about you.
Okay, so, and the motion passes. All right, last one.
I move that we vote to affirm the proposed mass resolution number 8.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. Okay, so I held this one. I'm just going to be hitting all the hot button issues there at this. I found this one, me personally, I found it to be overreach. It
it says that MASC recommends all districts urge their superintendent and staff to create an appropriate communication to parents and guardians that explains the importance of secure firearms storage. I am fully in support, just to be clear, I am fully in support of appropriate firearms storage to protect children. I'm also in support of hundreds of other things that we could encourage parents to do to protect children. I already said this to Eric. You know, do we also want to direct Eric to remind parents about putting a fence around their pool?
Or wearing seatbelts?
Or wearing seatbelt? Like, I just felt it was overreach. I have no problem with Eric deciding as an operational issue that he feels like it's an issue in the district and he chooses to put out a public safety message around. I have no problem with that, but this is directing us to direct him to do it, and so, anyway.
And we do work with local officials. I mean, we have something going out tomorrow with the drug bring back. You can bring back your prescription drugs.
Yeah.
So we do work to help communicate these things, but we don't have this like constant messages going out every time with various public service announcements.
And, I don't know. If I was at home in Alaska where guns are an issue, an issue, I would say yes, because they're a huge public safety issue there. But they're not as much in Massachusetts. Like,
That's, like, your thinking is totally valid. That's not my reasoning on this, and it's okay for people to end up in the same place and getting there a different way.
No, I agree. I think it's, I agree with you though. I do think it's overreach.
It feels like, you know, what's our role as far as what are ways that we can help stop gun violence from happening in schools? Like, maybe this is one way that we can do that. And I think it's just kind of unclear about what the actual direction is. Like Eric said, we do work with our local law enforcement agencies. But like, this just feels really specific, I guess, to your point about, like, is that our job to inform district parents to do this? I don't know.
Well, but then could you also make the argument that, well, Eric really should be sending out emails about NRA gun safety courses because that will increase gun safety in the district.
Where does it end? Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like, where do we stop?
Got a point.
Yeah.
All right, are we ready to vote? Do we have other? No?
I'm ready.
More to
I'm
say?
ready.
Okay, all right. All right, the motion is to direct the delegate to vote in the affirmative on resolution number 8. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, and that is 0 in favor, 5 opposed, the motion fails. Okay, I think I'm all set. I will confirm with our secretary, make sure that I'm accurate on how I'm voting, and I will report back later on.
Proposal to amend the MSC bylaws, is that another thing that we need to vote on? 3 years focus?
Yeah, that was in there.
Oh, yes.
It doesn't have a number, though.
It doesn't have a number, but I think you're correct.
See, hard
I have-
copies help.
I have, I think you are
I
correct.
happen to have
To
David
be
Frankel,
completely
who
honest, I
like
had
hard copies.
very little thoughts on the proposal to amend the MASC bylaws. But if anyone else has a thought?
I don't have any opinion about that.
You have a motion there, David?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee direct Dana Lara, our representative at the MASC conference, to vote in the affirmative for the proposal to amend the MASC bylaws as written. So.
Second?
Second by Amy. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I'm actually of two minds on this. On the other hand, this will allow school committees to reevaluate their positions when new people come in.
That should be the way it goes.
Right, so that's a positive. On the other hand, it does create an awful lot of busy work every extra year as the resolutions that we previously, supported, if they get re-brought up, we're gonna have to re-vote on them.
Well, yes, but to be, yes, but to be clear, that is work that's done at the MASC, and then they just,
But still, I mean, like, if we support a resolution this year, and there is no movement on it for 3 years, are we then gonna have to come back to the table in 3 years?
oh, that's a
Does
good
the
question. That's a
MSBA
good question. I was interpreting it that it sort of would, unless somebody brings it up again, it would just,
Keep going. That's what it seems, that's what I would, blah, blah, blah. It says here from supporting the current memberships by readoption. Oh, all right. Because I was thinking about that readoption was sort of that it'll carry over, but that's actually a different sentence.
Yeah, I thought it meant that it would, like, if nobody said anything, instead of keeping it on the books as our resolution, it would go away. And I can see that very quickly doubling the resolutions we have to deal with every year. Because not only would you get the new resolutions for that year,
that certainly could,
but
yeah.
you would get all the resolutions that didn't move forward that were submitted 3 years ago. So, like I said, I can see good things and bad things about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna add a lot to this document every year.
well, and then people have to go and they're gonna argue it, and the MASC meeting is gonna be even more contentious. and
I'm not
longer.
100% sure what it really means,
So
so.
in rereading this first paragraph, right? I'm reading it as open resolutions, not
confirmed
voted
one. Oh.
on resolutions, right? Am I so like you
I-
would have to bring it up again, like, oh, we're gonna table this discussion, oh, we're gonna table this discussion. You can only table it 3 times, right? Because they meet
Yeah.
once a year, and then it would have to be brought up again.
I guess we need a
I'm honestly
definition
not clear on
what
what
an
it
open
means.
resolution is.
Right.
Is it one that the legislature hasn't
Addressed,
addressed at all?
which would be lots
Or-
of them.
Or is it one that never came up for an MASC vote? And I just don't know the answer to that.
Well, no, it says 3 years after their adoption, so that would be that it's
So they
been
came up
voted
for a
on.
vote.
Yeah, right, it's their adoption, right, that, so, but if some, I interpret it as something, one of these gets out there, it's approved, nothing happens for 3 years, the state doesn't do anything, nothing happens, that someone would need to, it would just sort of disappear unless it got reintroduced. But again,
So we're not clear at the table.
Yeah.
Something tells me that, Dana being at the meeting will probably be much better informed of the discussion
so,
or screaming match in the
or
room.
whatever, so I would,
So I'm just trying to think of how do we guide you?
well, in other words, you could offer guidance, there's several things, right? We could vote to direct me not to vote on this item. You could vote to, some school committees don't do this at all. They just say to the delegate, vote how you feel. Go ahead, right?
I'd actually be pretty comfortable with sending you down with.
I'd be comfortable on this one, sending you down, you getting the information you need to answer the questions
Okay.
that we have, and then voting the way you feel.
So I think we have a motion and a second on the table, and the motion is to affirm. So I think we would either need to amend that motion or we need to vote and have another one.
I don't know how I would want to word that. That motion I just made was the first motion I've made in like 6 years, so.
Well, why don't we vote on that motion?
All
All right, so the motion, are we ready to vote on that motion? The motion was to say we're going to vote in the affirmative.
Okay.
So we can vote on that,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor? All right, all those opposed? That is 0 in favor, 5 opposed, the motion fails. Does anyone have another motion?
I moved at the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District, give Dana Laura, oh man, I just had it and I lost it. The authority to vote on the proposal to amend the ASC bylaws as she sees fit, representing our committee after further clarification is given.
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That's 5 in favor, and the motion, unanimous of the members in the room, and the motion
Pop
passes.
right out of my head, just gone.
My notes there, Dana votes how she wants. There we go.
Don't mess up, Dana.
And I will report back. Okay, thank you all for going through that, and I am very grateful for all that thought. It allows me to go into that room feeling a lot more knowledgeable. Okay, next up is the MSBA timeline, and I think we're going to turn to you, Eric.
Yeah, during last meeting, I think Dana requested if we could put together a timeline. Tom Geary was able to go back in time and pull the documents that are available currently on our website into one spot so that we had them all in one list for to make it easy for people to see the timeline. As you can see, we've been engaged in the process for 5 years. We're in the module 3, which is feasibility, which is really an investigative stage, kind of what's out there, what do you want to do, and what are some of the availabilities of location, things related to that. We'll continue that for the next 12 months and move into module 4, which is design phase, which is kind of some rudimentary designs where they literally put boxes in places and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? That whole process takes about 18 months from start to finish, the module 3 and module 4. So I just wanted, this was, I think it was you, Dana, I forget. I may have asked for this last meeting. So we put it all together, and certainly all the links are active so that people can take a look at any of the things that have occurred along the way.
Thank you. I did ask for the timeline, and you know, Francesca had brought up some concerns in that meeting, and I did ask for the timeline, and I will say I spent a little bit of time with it, and I am very appreciative of the work that went into this. It's very detailed, and it was really, really helpful to have. I found it helpful, I guess. The links were really helpful to have everything right at my fingertips, so I appreciated that. I'll start off with, does anyone have any questions about the timeline that is presented here? Francesca.
Yeah, I want to thank you very, very much for doing this, because I know it's a lot of work for Tom Geary to get to do something this detailed, and I know I requested it for my own kind of learning process of how things have been done up to this stage. Because you know, when a lot of decisions have been made back then, I wasn't here, and this really helps me to go back, because I will be here when we have to vote.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I have all the, because I feel like this is a very, very big decision for us to make for our town. It's going to be a very expensive project too, so I really want to make sure I understand the ins and outs of it. And I'm putting a lot of time in it, and I do appreciate, again, very much you helping me do that. So, this being said, I think that, you know, and I've spoken with some of you about it, you know, as I've learned about the process and gotten up to speed with the decision and the conversation that happened at this board and at other boards of the town. I came in really kind of thinking that the consolidation path is a good path forward. I've heard a lot about that. I've heard a lot of people talking about consolidation, and I've heard people in this group or even the superintendent communicating ideas of consolidating schools. And as I've been, initially I kind of look at that, like, okay, that sounds like a good thing to do. As I'm saying, as I'm getting up to speed with everything and doing a lot of research on the topic, I came across are we coming from as a board to kind of support consolidation, and are we supporting consolidation? Can you help me understand that? Because I'm a little bit confused about that. So my first question is, has the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District voted yet to support a consolidation project?
No.
Between 2 or 3 of the schools?
No.
So we have not. Okay. So
But-
that's very important.
Do we have to?
When the recommendation comes from the MSB, we'd have to vote to approve.
Okay, so that's my
their
question.
recommendation.
So,
So that's a
between
great
now,
question, but we want to, I want to fit it to, I think that's a great, and it's actually a great timeline question. Like, so I'm going to let you answer it,
yeah,
but go ahead. It's a
the timeline
question.
extends further beyond this. I mean, from 2018, we're looking at 2025 ATM, the town meeting. At that point, well, before that point, leading up to that meeting, we would have some choice to make. So feasibility and schematic design, through that process, we look at the 4 options on the table, plus all of the sites that the towns have given us in, I think it's excess of 12 acres. They do all of the studies that they're gonna start doing as soon as we're done visioning. The architects will say, here are our recommendations. That goes back to the school building committee first. The school building committee will listen to the recommendations and recommend some direction. It could be one of the 4 choices that are in the current agreement with the state, or none at all. I mean, that's always on the table to say this isn't a viable direction to go. So once that school building committee makes that recommendation comes here. And then that's up for discussion here at that time. So probably, I'm gonna say December 24, January 25. So it would, because it needs to be determined, a direction needs to be determined for town meeting so that you can say to the communities, we wanna build this is what it's gonna cost, and they vote on it.
And this is how much the state's gonna pay,
Yeah,
right? We
yeah,
all
well,
have that
roughly,
as well.
yeah.
Right.
The state's roughly covering 46.7%
Right.
of the cost. That will shift during the process based on, again, if we go with a green building, like sustainability push, you
Right.
can gain points on that. And it can go the other way too, because some things we might want, the state won't cover. So you could say, and this happened in my previous district, we want a bigger gym. Well, we're only gonna cover, I think it's 12,600 square foot gym for a school that, you know, the size of the high school I was running. Anything else, you guys pay for, so that's how your variability changes with the payback.
Yeah.
But there's no decision been made, and it could come all the way here to this committee, and this committee could vote it down.
Yeah, but what happens if we vote it down? We lose the opportunity to get the funding.
Quite possibly.
Yep.
We not want to get there.
Right.
We want to have certain discussions happen probably before
Mhm.
we get to the point that
Yeah.
an option comes to us, and we may not agree on how to move forward. Because that's, I think, would be a big loss for us not to be able to get that funding, because we're just, presented with an option that's not fully discussed. And I want to this leads to my next point, which is like, in order to decide to combine versus not combine, and have all these considerations, I went back, and it took me a long time, but I went back and looked at every single old school district that happened since then.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You went back?
I went back and looked at the videos and the recording of the school districts to fully understand the nuances of the discussions here. And I have to say that I have never really yet heard a conversation and a detailed discussion about the implications financially and also on the education of our children. What does it mean if we combine versus we don't? And I've been look at the Hamilton Wenham Cutler Elementary School ENR letter that was sent to us November 1st, 2022. It was actually addressed to Mr. Tracy, and that's on the website. It does state the MSBA understands that the district is proposing an enrollment to accommodate approximately 650 students, which means that, in other words, the district is giving directions to the MSBA to lean towards the road for consolidation. That's my understanding of it. Is my understanding correct? Based on
I think it just means that we have to accommodate that many students, that's what I took that to mean, whether it means in one building or two, that's what that means to me.
Through the process, the MSBA looked at both the Cutler and the Winthrop. And when you start to look at the total numbers of kids, it's
I think
So,
that number is just the number of students in,
Well, I think there's something here that I actually flagged. There's two things actually missing off this timeline, and I'm sure Tom is watching at home and about to text me.
Hi, Tom.
But it was before he got here, so he probably wouldn't recognize this. I believe in between the first two, the 3/28/18 and 12/2018, we actually did have a visit, an initial visit by the MASC to come and look at the Cutler building when it was just the Cutler. And at that time, which is the second thing that is missing here, it was suggested to us to, because we happened to swing by, I was on the walkthrough, we happened to swing by the Winthrop School as well, and it was suggested to us that when, a few months later, when we were turned down, it was suggested to us that we include Winthrop to strengthen our bid to try and get invited into the system.
So you're telling me that the MSBA suggested to us to check the box consolidation?
To check, to include the possibility,
So there's a box to check in the LOI that said.
that there's no box to check. We were,
If you look at the LO, I've read it like so many times, just because I wanted to understand it. So basically and we can ask Tom Leary so there's this, maybe you can pull up the LOI. Somebody can pull up the LOI so we can look at it. There's a box that checks, do you want something just for this building, or are you considering catch-up consolidation, and we check it, which I'm in agreement with that. I'm not saying we did the wrong thing. I think it was a smart thing to do, to consider consolidation. But I think it's different to say, I want to consider consolidation versus I want to do a consolidation. I think it's very two different directions that we, as the owners, are giving to the MSBA. And I also want to say that I talked to the MSBA a few times, again, to fully understand the process, because some things that I hear, like last time, they don't add up to me when I go look at the policies. I called them, and they do not tell us that we need to consolidate or not. It's our decision as a district.
correct.
so, okay, so okay,
They do not tell us that we have more chances or not to get funding.
that's
It's
correct.
our decision as a district to do that.
Correct.
Correct.
But it was suggested,
But-
that we might stand a better chance if both.
By the MSBA. Can we have somebody from the MSBA to come here and talk to us?
So I want to, hold on one second. So I want to roll it back. I want to express that I am a little bit concerned on a procedural level if you're contacting the MSBA. Only because,
No?
what do you mean, no?
She's concerned.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned only because we, as a committee, need to, when we have someone to go to speak to the MSBA, if we were to do that, we would need to agree as a committee that that person is going to speak to the MSBA. So I'm concerned about that.
I didn't directly talk with them, somebody else did, but, so it wasn't me directly, and you can look at the records because they keep records of everything. So,
So, and then the second part,
I don't understand where you're concerned. So the MSBA
So-
is a very transparent, actually, it was really interesting talking with them and hearing directly from them.
did you talk to them or did you not talk to them?
Not me directly.
Okay. So I do want to the second part of your question is that the,
Well, I just wanted to understand, because I heard a lot of confusing and contradicting information, and I just wanted to go to the root and understand how does this process really works?
so I guess I do want to, the part I think we're not connecting on is that we are at the beginning now of the feasibility study.
Right.
And my understanding is all of the questions that you are talking about are going to be addressed in the feasibility study. This is the time to address it. It's not at this meeting, it's at the building committee and at those
Right.
meetings.
I agree with that, but yes and no, yes and no. And I tell you why. So yes, I understand the process. There is a school building committee that's gonna be tasked with
Correct.
4 options. I do not question the 4 options. I think those are good, 4 good options, and I'm very excited that we'll have the opportunity to review those. What I am questioning here, and I think this belongs to the school committee board, not to the school building committee board to discuss, is the direction that we're giving to the MSBA and we're giving to the school committee board. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the school committee is the owner of the project.
Well, the
that correct?
contract that we have is actually an agreement between the district, the MSBA, and the towns, correct?
Yeah, but it would be our project. We're the owner.
Right.
Okay, we are the owner of the project. So, and we tasked the school building committee to do some research for us and to advise us on how to vote, but we still remain the owner.
Well-
So I feel like when you're the owner of, if we are the owner and we work with partners. One partner is the MSBA, one partner is JCJ that we have
Mhm.
selected to
Right.
conduct
Yep.
architectural analysis and studies and research, right? So I see, and correct me if I'm wrong here, there's like 3 parties, us, the MSBA, and JCJ. So if us as the owner,
So, Francesca, can I ask you, is there an action that you want us to take?
That's unnecessary.
no, I'm just asking questions and trying to understand things.
Okay.
So, I mean, if I'm taking.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I can ask her.
Ask a question.
But, so, no, I'm really concerned because I'm confused. So, if we are saying, so I'm reading this from, again, the letter November 1st, 2022, and try to, I know, maybe I'm not expressing myself really clearly, but if you try to follow my reasoning, we'll get there. And I'm not accusing anything, I just don't like when things are unclear. So the MSBA understands that the district is proposing an enrollment to accommodate approximately 650 students in a proposed facility that consolidates students from Cutler Elementary School and Winthrop Elementary School. So we really speak about consolidation. We're really in that direction to the MSBA and as a result of that process to JCJ. So we are doing it, but you just told me 5 minutes ago that we did not decide that. So can you please explain me?
Well, because
So-
nothing is set yet, but
Right.
at the same time, if that's your interpretation of that, then yes, that is how the district has voted and
But-
how the committee has voted.
So there's a letter from December 8th from MSBA, which follows that meeting, that the feasibility study will, and it lays out the 4 options, which not all of them are
Some of them are
consolidations.
consolidation
Some are
and some are not.
consolidations and some are not.
Right. So I'm very actually glad and grateful that the MSBA had the long-sighted view of giving us additional option. And they gave us options to not consolidate.
Right.
They gave us option to even consolidate further by adding Bucher, that would be option 4, right?
No,
So
no,
part of Bucher with restructuring, et cetera.
no,
Oh, it'd be
no,
be restructuring the students. It wouldn't.
no, no.
We have the possibility of restructuring.
No, you're asking-
how-
We have a 750 student
740.
Correct, and that option does not include Bucher.
Right.
It includes a
We will not be-
reconfiguration
It
with
would,
students.
that option would be that the MSB,
Let me rephrase it, I'm sorry.
Hold on. you're asking for clarification and you're asking questions, but you're not letting everyone answer.
So that option that you're talking about, which was the fourth option on that list, would look like building a consolidated school, basically Cutler and Winthrop together, but the grade configurations of that school has not yet been determined. It would be likely, though, that that school would be something like perhaps 1 through 5 or perhaps 2 through 5, and that a new school with those grades, and that Bucher would continue to exist without any money from the state, and we might choose to put like pre-K and K here at Bucher. But the MSBA has no statement about what we would be doing with Bucher at all.
Right.
Yeah, I understand, and sorry, I think, yeah, I knew that, and I just didn't phrase it correctly. I didn't mean to consolidate Bucher as a building, but consolidate students that currently would be enrolled in the Bucher building.
Yeah, I mean.
Correct,
I
that's
went
where
to-
that number
I went to middle
comes.
school in Bucher.
Yeah.
What was that?
I went to middle school in Bucher.
It's
So
it
that's,
changes up.
but,
It's a
but
chameleon.
again, that's at the discretion of the district
That's
at
at
any
the-
time.
right.
We could do that next year and send everybody over to Miles River for the
Correct,
elementary school.
right.
That's our
And-
discretion.
And this hypothetical consolidated school, if that were to happen, the district could reconfigure grades at our discretion. It's not, the state isn't telling us what grades we have to.
Right, yeah, I guess what really concerns me is the number of elementary kids, elementary school students in one building. That's what that's where I'm more coming from. So like anywhere above 400 to me is just unthinkable, and that's me, but that's not.
Well, but I mean, there's plenty of research to that, and that is something that is taken into account when everything is actually, thought out and the
Right.
final
And
recommendation.
that's
for
a
given.
real point of discussion in the feasibility process. That's an important
Yeah.
part.
But again, going back to what I was trying to say, and again, thank you for bearing with me so long, but I think that what we are saying to the MSBA, or at least what we said to the MSBA prior to the initiation of the feasibility study, is we want to consolidate, and this is stated here. I am happy to share it.
So,
We've
Right,
seen it.
and I
We
said
voted on
yes.
it.
Correct,
Right,
but-
yes.
But you're telling me also that the district did not vote for that, so.
No, we
here's
did.
the-
It's actually right there. Because we voted to approve that letter. So we did vote
so, and
to do
just
that.
to.
If that's your, with the interpretation that it is one of many options, but we were willing to consider.
Right.
So that you can interpret it any way you want. I'm agreeing with you that, yes, we voted there. If you would like to change the direction of this, you have the floor to do so. The committee has already voted, positively, and you're holding it in your hand. I'm telling you, yes, that is how we voted. So your interpretation is correct, that the wording of keeping the,
You just told me before that you didn't vote.
because we haven't come to we haven't set anything in stone. We have
Right.
set the motion forward.
There's motion.
You could argue with me all night long, right? You could, and I know you will.
Please
But I'm
don't.
telling you to put a motion out there to change it, or just accept that this is already voted in and move on.
Well, actually, I think I asked at the last committee to have a point in the agenda to be able to make a motion.
This is here.
Here it
You're
is.
in it.
Make a motion.
Well, I have to say that I really want to go and dig deeper into all that information that was given to us today. And again, I thank you very much, Tom Geary and Superintendent, for providing it, and the motion will come.
None of this is new information, though. Like, these are all agendas.
Yeah, I think I know most of that. I think that what I was looking for in here is when did we vote for agreeing to consolidate and agreeing to provide guidance to the MSBA to consolidate.
So-
Well, we did.
But-
So that
but-
disconnect, I was just kind of like, I want to make sure, how that
I-
falls there.
I just want to be clear, though, the contract that we have, that this group approved and voted on, has 4 options on it. That's the contract that our feasibility, that is the entering into the feasibility study. That is the work that the feasibility study, it sounds like you're talking about how we got there, but to be clear, that's where we are. Like, that is the work that is happening at the feasibility level now.
And I would say once again, yes and no, because yes, we have those 4 options in place. But but we are an owner that said, we have 4 options, but we want to go for those 2 that consolidate.
And
So that, to me, when you hire somebody to do a job for you because you're the owner and you tell them, this is where we want to go, and that's the messages, the emails that went out, we're saying it, people read it.
so I guess I'm gonna,
Let me finish. So what I am saying, I'm sorry to annoy you, but like.
you're not annoying me. It's frustrating that we're not communicating well.
As owners, sorry if I'm not communicating well.
No,
So,
that's
but
not what I
as
said.
Owners, if we say to the people we contracted with a job, this is the direction that we want to take, then that carries a big weight on them. Then they will tell you, well, why don't we also evaluate these or the other options? And that's wonderful, and I'm so glad they did that. But as owners, we still set that direction, and I don't think that's correct. I don't think we need to go back, but what I would like to discuss further is whether there's a way to convey the message, what we just said, that as owners, we don't necessarily want to be set in stone in that direction yet. But we want to be open.
But we've already
I'm
voted
actually
that
gonna,
is
I'm
the
gonna let
direction
Jen
we're
talk, because she
with.
has not said a thing. Go ahead, Jen.
You might not like what we said there, and that is totally your appointment. But the school committee, when we voted on that, decided by, if I remember correctly, it was a unanimous vote,
Yep.
that that is what we wanted to say. Precisely what is in that email.
Can I say something? This is not an email from the school committee. This is not something you
Well,
voted on.
but what is in
This
the,
is not something you voted on.
no, we
I agree
did
with
vote
you.
it on that.
No, this is just a
So,
letter.
so I think that I hope you feel like this was we spent some time discussing. At this point, and I am at the will of the committee, but at this point, I feel like if you want an action to be taken, I think you need to make a motion that tells the committee what action it is that you want us to take.
I do have a motion. I'm not sure that I wanna do this today.
That's-
A little bit more, if you allow me to.
Of course. I mean, as a school committee member, just to be clear, you can make a motion at any time, on any item you want to. So if you're not ready to do it today, you can do it on another day.
And I wanna apologize if I sound accusatory. I'm not, maybe it's just because my demeanor is like that, but I don't mean to be accusatory to anybody. I think everybody did a great job. I really love the 4 options. I'm glad we have the opportunity to discuss these 4 options. I just really wanna make sure that I understand where we're coming from and what did we vote on, what did we suggest. I mean, I think to me, those little words carry a lot of weight on a process of this.
I want to give you one more,
Wanna make sure.
I want to give you one more bit of information, and I will look to the committee to make sure that this feels true. When we voted in that, when we had the discussion and we voted in that meeting on the 4 options, we were voting on to enter into this agreement to begin the feasibility study. I will say, however, and I have also rewatched that meeting, part of the job, a big part of the job of the school committee is to provide feedback and advice to the superintendent. And at that meeting, we voted unanimously, and also there was a discussion in which members provided feedback to the superintendent. And much of that feedback, Francesca, was support and enthusiasm for consolidation. And so the superintendent, part of the superintendent's role is to hear the voices and get feedback from the school committee. You were not on the school committee at that time. You may have voiced something different, but you weren't there. And that was something that is, again, not a vote, but as a part of that vote, that's what happened. I just wanted you to have that information. I don't know if other committee members feel like I'm characterizing that incorrectly.
I am so glad you're saying that because that explains a lot. And I by no means am blaming, I mean, I think Superintendent's done a wonderful job to carry this, this whole project. So I'm really talking to the board, not the superintendent right now. So, yes, so I'm really glad you're saying that guidance was provided in that direction because that does explain a lot. That leads me to a second question to the committee. So the committee provided guidance for consolidation based upon what data is my question. Based upon what pros and cons.
So I'm going to let this go about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then I'm going to ask for a vote because I want to move on with the rest of the evening. Go ahead.
So I agree with what Dana said. Looking back at the conversation that was had, it wasn't a vote on we as a body want consolidation. It was a discussion about different ideas, and I remember the discussion about consolidation making sense and being positive, but the vote was to go ahead with the feasibility study in which it was clear that we would be presented with different options, including that option. So I never was of the mind that like, this is what we want. Yes, I'm of the mind that this is the process, and within the process, we will see A, B, C, and D.
Jen?
So at this point in time, irregardless of what has happened in the past, we are going to send the feasibility study to MSBA, correct?
Well, the feasibility stage has begun with
Right.
visioning.
Yeah, just,
So-
we're at the beginning.
And the MSBA, I let you speak. And the MSBA is gonna come back at us and say, this is, either you can't go with it, or this is the one you're gonna go with.
No, it's our choice.
It's right, it's
Based on
it's
the
the building, working collaboratively, like, I mean,
But
it's
it's gonna
over months and months. We're gonna,
18
eventually,
18
there's gonna
months.
be a vision of here's the potential
Right.
project, or there's no feasible project at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna be honest, I don't care what the MSBA says we're gonna do. I'm gonna go with it, because turning down $100 million plus
Well,
would
we
be
only get 46%.
at plus interest that we don't have to pay on it, would be fiscally irresponsible.
I agree with that.
We cannot go back to the town and say, we had the opportunity to get you guys a new school. We weren't 100% behind what the outcome was, and so we said no, because the town is gonna come back at us, and they're gonna say, well, guess what? You're stuck in Cutler and you're stuck in Winthrop because we ain't paying $100 million.
Right.
Right, and you're hitting like the exact point where I wanna go to, which I do not want this project to fail, and that's where I am coming from. I think that if we push the consolidation, and first of all, I wanna make a correction, but I think the superintendent should make this correction. It's not the MSBA that's gonna decide on which option.
But
So
they-
it's not that, it is the school building committee and it is us. Can you please confirm that and explain it so that we are all on the same page on how the process works?
So that's the reason we're doing the feasibility process. They're gonna look at all 4 options. They're gathering information from visioning, they're gathering information from the community, they're gathering information from the town government. They bring all this information together. They offer what's called the quote preferred option. The school building committee would vote to say, yes, they support that, or maybe we should look at something else. When the school building committee takes a direction, say they pick option 2, they would, excuse me, they would bring it back here for the final vote. And if the school committee says, yes, we want to go with option 2, which I think is an ad renovation, then that's the direction we go in. So there's nothing set in stone. I mean, I understand that you don't like the consolidation process, which was what this is all about, but it's not guaranteed that we'll get there. We could end up with just a renovation of the Cutler School, option 1. It's just going to depend on the process.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So yes, I don't like that we've given direction for consolidation while there wasn't like an actual vote for it, and that's a different story. But I think that, so because we're looking, so and again, this school
Okay,
building committee, it's not the MSBA. It's basically us with member of the MSBA and other members as well. So it's not the MSBA
So,
telling us.
Francesca, this is, I really think we are well beyond the four corners of what was the agenda item at this point. I want to respect you, but, okay.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District clearly clarifies with both the MSBA and the school building committee that neither of the options currently under consideration involving a consolidation of Cutler and Winthrop schools should be given greater weight or preference to options currently under consideration that do not involve such consolidation.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by David Polito. So I want to make sure I understand the motion. I want to make sure I can restate the motion. The motion is to instruct or to, what's the verb?
I want to say, yes, well, I said to clarify, which means, I guess, instruct with some
So-
sort of like maybe a letter.
So, okay, can you read it one more time, because I just don't.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District clearly clarifies with both the MSBA and the school building committee that neither of our options currently under consideration involving a consolidation of the Cutler and Winthrop schools should be given a greater weight or preference to options currently under consideration that do not involve such consolidation. In other words, what I'm saying, like, we have 4 options, all right, currently on the table. Some of these involve consolidation, like option number 2 and number 4. Some of these don't.
So if I may restate, it sounds like what you're saying is that you want the district to clarify with both the MSBA and the school building committee that all 4 options should be weighed equally.
Exactly.
Is that, I know I didn't word it exactly the way you said it, but I just wanted to make sure that that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a
What
question.
respects?
I have a point of clarification or discussion about the motion. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
I don't feel that they are weighted differently at this point. So what would be the purpose of doing that?
Because, like I said, with that prior communications saying that we provided guidance towards the consolidation, which is being confirmed, it's not being voted on, but it's being kind of, everybody agreed that that was gonna be the direction.
No,
So
I
feel
don't
like
agree with that. That's not true.
There is a way,
No.
and I feel like, I wish that we have an opportunity with a lot of experts coming onto the table
Yeah.
to tell us what among those 4 options is most important. I really want them to go unbiased on this. I
So,
really want them to give us the best
so-
option forward and not necessarily something that, because of the $100 million, like, a consolidation is probably gonna cost a lot more.
So I guess, Francesca, this is me speaking as just a member here, it really feels like you're not hearing, like, I personally feel like this is exactly what that document already says. The fact that I have a thought about those 4 options is okay. Just the fact that you clearly have some thoughts about those 4 options also. That's okay. That's not going to prevent us from exploring all 4 options.
Right.
This is what we've already said. In my mind, this is what the contract says. And I personally have concerns about what this kind of whatever it is, a statement or a letter, I have concerns about what that would say to the MSBA about what's going on here, because we've already done this.
Right.
Jen?
As it seems, we're just re-arguing the same points. I call the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to vote on whether to vote, correct?
Correct.
Correct. All right, so there has been, I'm sorry, did we get a second? to the vote to vote? Oh, no, we don't get a second.
We don't need a second.
Not
sorry.
for that, no.
All right, so we're voting on whether or not to move the question and vote. Okay, does everybody know what we're voting on? We're just voting on whether to vote. Okay. All those in favor? Okay, 4 in favor. Are those opposed? So 4 in favor, 4 in favor, 1 opposed. The motion passes, so we've moved to a vote. Okay. The motion on the table is to, we should vote to direct the Hamilton Wenham School District to clearly clarify that to both the MSBA and the school building committee that all 4 options for the Cutler Building project should be weighed equally. Is that correct? Okay. All right. All those in favor? Those opposed? That is 1 in favor and 4 opposed, and the motion fails. Okay. Thank you very much, all, for navigating a complicated and challenging discussion. I appreciate it. Next up on the agenda, we have Vinny, I think, going to give us an overview of E&D.
I think you're napping.
Watch your microphone. Come on, Lorenzo.
Before Vinny starts, do we have to, in the next 7 minutes, vote to
We do,
continue with the
yes.
meeting? So should we just?
Would you like to make a motion at this
Yes.
point? Go ahead, Jen.
I would like to move that we vote to continue the meeting until 10:30 PM, at which point we reevaluate.
Friendly amendment up to 10:30 PM.
Up to 10:30 PM, at which point in time we reevaluate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? The motion passes of the 4 members present. Thank you, Jen.
That way we don't
Yeah,
have to.
no, I appreciate it. All right.
interrupt.
All right, Vinny, go ahead.
I'll try to be a little quicker than I was planning on, especially for Jen. So tonight I'm going to give you a quick overview on our excess and deficiency account as of June 30th, 2023. So before I get into how we calculate our E&D and what happened over the year, I just have a quick definition of what E&D is. Per the DOR, which is the Mass Department of Revenue, excess and deficiency is the amount by which cash and accounts receivable and other assets exceed a regional school district's liabilities and reserves. But when I read that, I really don't know what it means, so I kind of put my own definition here. In my own words, it's the amount of money that we have left over at the end of the year, or it's kind of our profit and loss, or our surplus, or our deficits at year end. I'm going to run you through quickly what our E&D for the end of FY23 looks like, but just a big disclaimer, this hasn't been submitted to the Department of Revenue, this hasn't been certified, and the auditors have not wrapped up our financial statements. I don't anticipate this is going to change at all, but you never know with the auditors and the Department of Revenue. It could change just slightly, a little bit, but nonetheless, this is pretty accurate. So with any calculation, you always have a beginning point. This is where we started with our E&D account on July 1 of 2022. We started with roughly 4.4 million. This is the amount that the Department of Revenue certified back in February of 2023. As part of that number, though, they take a snapshot of what your accounts look like on June 30th. On that date, it included $90,000 of deficits as it relates to our grants. For those of you who have heard me say it before, our grants always work in the rears, so we spend the money first and then get reimbursed for whatever we spent. So majority of the time, our grants are always in a deficit. When the DOR certifies your revenue, they take that into consideration and remove that deficit before they certify your balance. But when I talk about it, I really don't include those deficits, but I put it on the slide in case anyone tries to trace back the numbers to what the DOR reports on their website. So the real number I kind of talk about is the 4.5 million you see a little bit ways down your screen. That's really where we started the year back in July 1 of 2022. So from there, that's our starting point, and we run through what happened during the year. If you go back to my presentation in August, when I reported to you what our final year-to-date actuals were for FY23, I mentioned that we underspent our budget by about $4.9 million. That's the first line you see in the additions. This is the amount of money in our budget that we didn't spend. So you hear me say multiple times, there's always two parts of our budget. There's the revenue side and the expenditure side. This is the expenses, what we didn't spend. The other side, which is the second line, is our revenue side. We received about $680,000 above our budget for revenues. This includes excess from Chapter 70, from our regional transportation that we spoke about earlier, as well as additions for Medicaid and interest income. That's one that shot up drastically this year with the increase in interest rates. We earned a lot more money on our investments than we originally planned. From there, you also add in what we did not spend from FY22. So at the end of every year, we roll over a certain number of purchase orders. These are orders we've made or contracts we've agreed to with vendors that didn't happen by June 30. We roll them over, and for whatever reason, they didn't happen again within July and August, whether the vendor canceled it because they couldn't supply the labor, or whether WB Mason canceled the order because there was substitutes, so they couldn't fulfill it. At the end of the day, we didn't spend the money that we planned on. That also gets added into our E&D. So for FY23, we actually added roughly $3.3 million into the account, but you also have to subtract a lot of things. So during the year, back in, again, on February 9th of 2023, the school committee voted to use a chunk of our E&D to fund the FY24 budget. That was approximately $3.1 million. This was for items like the $1.7 million in the capital stabilization transfer, a $770,000 reduction to our operating budget, as well as a couple capital items around the district, the smart boards, and kind of the makeover of the gym behind us. So that comes out of our E&D to fund the 24 budget. In addition, there's $2.1 million in our holding account, as well as the removal of our current year deficits, just like we added in the grants up above from FY22 after we received the money in July and August. When we ended FY23, we had about $236,000 in grant deficits again. Subsequently, again in July of August of this year, that money came back in. So again, next year, you'll see me add this same number back in. And then there's just a little bit of a rounding issue. That always comes because the DOR and our auditors, they don't deal with pennies. And when you have a list of 1,000 accounts and they cut off the pennies, there's going to be a little rounding issue every year. It might go up or down. This year, it was removed. That equals about $5.5 million that were removed out of the account. So you take your beginning balance, what we added into it, and what we removed. We're left with $2.3 million. This is the real kind of E&D amount above the threshold that we will talk about over our budget season. But one thing I wanted to throw in here is the fact that If you recall, during last year, during my financial forecast and during our year-end forecast, I did make the recommendation that we match again for fiscal '25, that $773,000 number that hasn't left us since COVID and Chapter 70 was going to be reduced. So that line item there isn't a definite, it's just something I had mentioned we should use in the upcoming budget cycle. And then last is about $1.5 million that we need to figure out kind of how to handle. Last night, I believe, or 2 nights ago, I did run this by our capital finance subcommittee, and we already started talking about potential things to utilize this money for, and for our upcoming budget cycle. So in about a month from now, you'll get your first look at the budget, and that's going to incorporate at least our first round of ideas on what to do with this sum of money. But ultimately, that $2.2 million has to be worked in within our budget and somehow either configured within our budget or return a little bit of it to the towns. But ultimately, I will kind of vet this through capital finance before we present it to the full committee within our budget. So that's how you calculate our E&D, and that's kind of the changes throughout the year. If anyone does have any questions, I can kind of run through the timeline on how the E&D process works, if anyone doesn't have any questions. Think we're good? Okay. So for E&D, it's just a little bit of a timeline. I created this slide a couple years ago to kind of help walk through how it works. The DOR has kind of a unique look at it. When June 30 ends and July 1 starts, they put a freeze on the funds. They look at it as the school district needs to be audited. The team has to come in and verify that whatever I'm reporting is actually supported by our documentation and supported by money at the bank. This happens over the summer through July and August. Once Powell's and Sullivan finishes their financial statements, I work with the Department of Revenue and submit all the required documentation for our E&D. By the end of this month, I will complete that step and submit the entire package to the Department of Revenue. At that point, they consider it audited, but still not certified, and it's still frozen. We can't do anything with it. We can't access it until the DOR has completed their review. I don't really know why it takes a while. My only guess is they also do certify the town's free cash, which does have an earlier deadline. So I think they kind of push regional school districts off a little bit later because our deadline really isn't until February, where the cities and towns is December. So they kind of look at us last, but we still have the same deadline as the towns do. Nonetheless, once the DOR goes through and certifies it, just about around February 1st, that's when the school committee could utilize it. At that point, from February 1st till again June 30th, before it comes frozen again. That's usually and historically what our regional does, is incorporate that amount into our preceding year's budget. So again, for this year, once it's certified, we'll work these numbers into our '25 budget and bring a recommendation to you guys just about a month from 2 days ago, I believe. So we'll look forward to that, and I believe that is it for my E&D presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Nope. But I'm
Just one-
missing your thank you slide. It's out, it's not there today.
It's not there, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I just want to say that I think I say it every year, I think that chart is so helpful because it is, I finally don't feel confused by it, but I did for a really long time, and this chart has been helpful to me year after year. So
You definitely got to see it a couple times to
definitely.
kind of
Yeah,
have
for
it
sure.
kick in.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, committee reports. Capital Finance, we just heard a little bit about what you're up to.
Yes, so we met today or yesterday, excuse me, and we discussed E&D, and we discussed our very loosey-goosey first quarter
Forecast.
which I'm sure Vinny will
I think that's the next,
bring it up.
school committee
But, yeah, as he'll make the point, it's our least
accurate forecast.
accurate forecast, yes. And on our agenda for the next capital finance meeting, which is the hour before the next school committee meeting starts, we will be discussing or examining the first draft of the budget.
Okay, thank you. Policy, I think you guys have not met, is that right? Okay, all right, thank you. Negotiations, we are going to give you an update in executive session. Do you have a secretary report for us on the minutes?
No, because you said that, until there's something you do not do it.
Excellent. All right, excellent. I guess I'm mostly just so proud that we're doing really well in negotiations on our minutes, so I wanted to report just patting on the back, but I'll just shout out to ourselves. So, all right. Superintendent's report?
Yep, I have 3 quick things. We have begun the budget process for FY25, which is always interesting that we start it now, but the process goes from now through early February, as we all know. We have to make that final vote 45 days before the town meeting that's scheduled in April, so we have started that process. We'll begin meeting with all of our budget holders, the principals, directors, all next week. For individual meetings to go through every segment of their budget to review and see if they're recommending any changes, increases, etc. So Vinny and I will be very busy next week with those meetings. Happy to report that we had our 3rd public visioning session last night, actually, at the high school. It was a 3-hour session to just kind of think big about the whole project. Which connected back to an all-day session we had the previous week, which really laid out like what are the important things we think, what are the things that we believe are important in the process of learning for this building. So there'll be other sessions that will be offered. We're going to try to do some sessions with some 5th graders to try and just get a feel for where kids are at, and then as we move through this process, there'll be these kind of open question sessions where the architect designer and the OPM will come back to small groups or to groups of teachers or to the school building committee to ask questions related to what their process has been. So they basically continue to collect information almost through December almost, and then they begin that process of working with the state to meet various deadlines of how the process is going through feasibility, how the schematic design process rolls forward. And again, this takes about 18 months, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, depending on what the variables are within the process. So we are well underway with that. And then I'm happy to note that last week there was an athletic facilities improvement committee meeting. It's always a mouthful. And they are getting ready to work with Gail, the designer, to release the bid documents in, I believe, December, late November, December, which will push the process. Following the process will put us out to probably early February to choose a builder from that point, and then we're still on track to begin early spring, pending snow, weather, and the availability of when the builder can start. So we're still shooting for that April deadline. And that is it. Lots going on.
Thank you. I'm going to just say I don't have a lot to say, so we'll just move past the chair's report. Although I did want to put a plug for, I noticed I pulled it up, the budget calendar, Vinny's Budget 101 session, which is for school committee members to attend, is on November 8th. I'm just going to put a plug in. If you liked that chart, he has other fantastic ways of explaining. So I highly recommend any school committee members that it's a really helpful thing before you start off the budget process. So if you can do that.
Particularly if you've never been through it
Yeah,
before or been through a big budget before, it is
Yeah, I've been,
Definitely worth it.
yeah, I've been a few times, and it's helpful. Okay, topics for future meetings. Francesca?
I would like to have a topic on the agenda for us to discuss the pros and cons of large schools versus small schools.
Okay.
At the elementary level.
Okay. I think like a lot of agenda items, I want to think about where does that fit into the work plan?
And may I ask, who would we ask to present on this? Because this is not something I'm an expert in, and I don't even know anybody who's an expert in this, and I should.
That could be a topic for discussion to kind of figure out who, I actually have some suggestions on that.
So, okay, but, hold on. So we always we want to look at the work plan, right? And think about where does that topic fit in with the year, right? So, I'm going to just say, Jen gave a suggestion about talking about start times, right? That was the topic. And that's not really something that's right, apparently, where it's going to fall. It's not something that is clear, like where that would be. And so I think I advised that she make sure that she chats with Eric. It might be something that it will be someday on an agenda, but it's probably not going to be immediately because that's something that Jen and Eric can talk about. It's complicated, right? There's a complicated.
Yeah, and
so-
before I talk to Eric, I've been trying to like sketch out what.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that I'm making it clear that like sometimes topics aren't, timely, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm not sure where that would go on. It's very late and we still have an executive session, so I'm gonna write it down.
Can I add that I think it's a very important topic for us to educate ourselves on the decision of consolidating versus non-consolidating, and we're asked to vote on that in 2 months.
We're not
Well-
voting on consolidating versus consolidating in 2 months.
The feasibility process is gonna give us an option that we're gonna vote on when?
Not for a while. We-
December, when?
Oh, no. That's like the kind of the visioning process and the development of all the, it's still going. It goes into the spring. You got a long ways to go.
When are we gonna have to vote on consolidation or on one of the 4 options? When is that gonna happen?
It will depend on the time it takes the designer to get through the process. So it can go anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
So that was actually,
We've only
just.
just begun. We're
Right.
very early in.
I thought it was 2 months.
No,
No,
so
no,
I'm
no,
actually,
no.
I'm actually glad that you phrased it that way, because this was,
No.
I have to admit, I was ready to move on, but I'm glad we had this little back and forth, because I hope that felt helpful, that what I'm hearing you say, and tell me if I'm saying this right, is that as we get closer to that, as we get closer to making that decision, one of the things you would like to be sure that we have a discussion about are the topic of school size.
And impact on education, impact on finance, and that kind of thing. I think it's an important educational session for us to have and a conversation for us to have.
Okay, so I'm gonna write that down, make sure that I get clear on it. Eric's gonna write it down, with the understanding that you'll hold me accountable. You'll let me know if you're feeling like things are moving along and we haven't talked about this. You can, yeah, exactly. Thank you, because we don't really know exactly when that's gonna be timely. Okay. Other topics for future meetings?
Vinny has a couple.
Oh, Vinny.
The Q1 financial forecast and the auditors need to come in to present for the 23 financial
Yeah.
statements.
When do the auditors come?
I They're getting back to me, but I asked them if they could come to either the first one in November or the second one in November. I was gonna see maybe which one works better
Okay.
for you. If it doesn't matter, I can leave it up to them, but, or
I
just
don't,
tell me
off the
one.
top of my head, I don't know which one, but I think it doesn't take all that long, does it?
Not them, I would say maybe they're
Yeah,
15
15 minutes, yeah.
Minutes, yeah.
Okay, so it probably doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Doesn't matter? Okay.
Okay.
I'll leave whatever one works best for
All
them.
right. Okay, anybody else? Okay.
Nope.
All right. At this point, I move to adjourn into executive session for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the teaching assistant union, where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and we will not return to open session. Second by Francesca, and it is a roll call vote. Thank you, Jen. Jen?
Yes.
Francesca? Amy?
Yes.
Dana's a yes.
Yes.
And we are adjourned into executive session at 10:15.
Are we-